If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. I still hear it sometimes. That whisper, that hungry sound that's not quite human, not quite animal. It comes to me in dreams, or when the wind blows just right through the trees outside my cabin. Even after all these years. My name is Thomas Armon. I was a ranger at Olympic National Park back in '57. Before that, I was a combat medic in Korea. I patched up boys while bullets flew overhead and tried to keep their insides from becoming outsides. Some made it, many didn't. I carry those ghosts with me, along with my brother's dog tags that I keep wrapped around my wrist. He never made it home. I thought the quiet of the forest would help quiet my mind. The nightmares had gotten so bad. I barely slept. Chief Ranger Doyle, Walt, he understood. He'd been there too, seen the same things in Korea. That's why he gave me the job despite the dark circles under my eyes and the way I'd sometimes stare off into nothing when the memories got too loud. That spring was wrong from the start. Anyone who knows the Pacific Northwest knows it should be rainy, but warming up. Instead, patches of snow lingered in the shadows beneath the ancient Douglas firs. The moss hanging from the trees seemed to shiver in the unseasonable cold. Fog rolled through the valleys every morning, thicker than I'd ever seen it. "Weather's off," Eddie Martinez told me one morning as we checked equipment at the ranger station. Eddie was the local guide, born and raised in these parts. Young guy, maybe 25, with a permanent smile and stories about every trail and creek in the park. My grandmother would say it's because something's woken up in the woods. I laughed it off. The doctors at the VA had warned me about mixing lack of sleep with the pills they gave me for the nerves. Said it could make me see things, hear things. I figured Eddie's grandmother's warnings fell into the same category as my hallucinations. Things not to be taken too seriously. Then the call came in about the Jensen family. Father, mother, 2 kids, vanished 3 days into what was supposed to be a week-long camping trip. Last radio contact was strange. Just Mr. Jensen's voice, shaky and uncertain. There's something out here watching us. The kids keep hearing someone calling their names. Then static. Walt asked me to lead the search party. "You've got the best tracking skills in the park, Tom," he said, not mentioning that he knew I'd be awake anyway. My insomnia sometimes made me the only ranger available at odd hours. We assembled quickly. Eddie would guide us to the Jensens' last known location. A wildlife photographer named Judy Klein insisted on coming along. Said she was doing a feature for some nature magazine, but I could tell she smelled a bigger story. Dr. Lawrence Hoffman, an anthropologist studying local Native American tribes, volunteered his help too. I didn't want civilians along, but Walt thought having a photographer document everything would help if the search turned into a recovery mission. Nobody said it out loud, but we were all thinking it. Families don't just disappear in national parks without a reason, and those reasons are rarely good. We packed our gear and headed out as the late afternoon sun filtered weakly through the fog. The forest felt different that day. The usual sounds, birds, small animals rustling in the underbrush, were missing. Just the sound of our boots on the damp earth and our breath fogging in front of us. "It shouldn't be this cold," Eddie said, zipping his jacket up to his chin. 6 hours of hiking brought us to the Jensen campsite just as darkness fell. What we found there turned my blood to ice. Their tent was shredded, not torn down by a bear or a cougar, but ripped from the inside out, like something had exploded outward. Their cooking pot still sat on a small camp stove, a half-prepared stew inside, no longer warm, but not old enough to spoil. The children's toys, a small plastic horse and a doll, were arranged in a circle around the dead campfire. But what really got to me were the footprints, huge, elongated impressions in the soft earth, with too many toes, too long in the arch. Not human, not animal either. At least, not any animal I knew from my years in these woods. And the trees. Some of them were marked with strange symbols carved into the bark, dark with what looked horribly like dried blood. "We should radio this in," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'd seen men with their insides spilled out onto battlefield. Dirt. I'd held dying boys as they called for their mothers. But something about this campsite filled me with a dread I couldn't explain. As Eddie fumbled for the radio, Judy took photos, the flash briefly illuminating the dark woods around us. In one of those flashes, I could have sworn I saw eyes reflecting, back at us from between the trees, too high up to be a bear, too many to be a person. "No signal," Eddie said, the usual cheerfulness gone from his voice. "We'll make camp here," I decided, forcing authority into my voice. "First light, we start tracking." As we set up our tents, I felt it for the first time, that sensation of being watched by something hungry, something patient, something old. Checked my pistol, more out of habit than any belief it would help against whatever had taken the Jensen family. My brother's dog tags clinked softly against my wrist as I moved. "We'll find them tomorrow," Dr. Hoffman said confidently as we gathered around our small fire. But his eyes kept darting to the darkness beyond our circle of light. None of us slept well that night. How could we, with the wind carrying what sounded like distant whispers through the trees? Whispers that, if you listened too closely, almost formed words. Morning came slowly. I hadn't slept more than 20 minutes at a time. Every noise, every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves jerked me awake. The others looked just as bad, with dark circles under their eyes and jumpy movements. We should split up to cover more. "Ground," Judy suggested as we ate a cold breakfast. "No one wanted to wait for water to boil." "Bad idea," I said right away. "Whatever happened here, we stay together." Dr. Hoffman nodded in agreement, but Eddie looked doubtful. "The family could be scattered. We might miss them if we stick to one path." I didn't like it, but he had a point. Time wasn't on our side, especially if any of the Jensens were hurt. "Fine," I finally said, "but nobody goes more than a quarter mile from base camp, and we all meet back here every 2 hours. Understood?" They all nodded, though I could tell. Judy was already planning to go wherever the story led her. I headed north, following what looked like the father's boot prints. The forest was strangely quiet, not even the usual morning birds singing. About 20 minutes in, I stopped dead in my tracks. Something was wrong with the trees ahead of me. Ice. There was ice growing on the tree trunks, forming right in front of my eyes. Thin, crystalline patterns spreading across the bark like frozen fingers. I checked my watch's thermometer. 52 degrees, way too warm for ice. I reached out and touched one of the formations. It was real, all right, cold as a deep freezer. As my fingers brushed it, I swear I heard a faint laugh, like a child, but not quite right, coming from somewhere behind me. I spun around, hand on my pistol, but saw nothing but trees and undergrowth. When I got back to camp for our first check-in, Eddie was already there. His usual smile was gone, and his hands were shaking as he held something wrapped in his bandana. "Found this about a quarter mile east," he said quietly, unfolding the cloth. It was a human finger, severed at the second knuckle, with a gold wedding band still around it. The blood was fresh. "Jensen's," Eddie said. "Has to be. The ring matches." The description his brother gave when he reported them missing. My stomach turned. In Korea, I'd seen all kinds of awful wounds, but something about finding just a finger in these quiet woods was worse somehow. Judy returned next, clutching her camera with white knuckles. "I got something," she said, her voice tight. "I was photographing some tracks when I felt like someone was watching me. I turned and took a quick shot of that ridge." She pointed to a rocky outcrop about 100 yards from camp. "Look." She showed us the small screen on her fancy camera. There, standing at the edge of the ridge, was a dark figure. The photo was a bit blurry, like she'd taken it in a hurry, but I could make out something tall and thin, too tall to be a normal person, looking down at our camp. It could be a shadow or a dead tree. Dr. Hoffman said when he rejoined us, but he didn't sound convinced. As evening approached, we huddled around the radio, trying to call for backup. Instead of static or the ranger station's response, we heard something that made my skin crawl. Children's voices singing a nursery rhyme, faint but clear. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies. That's impossible, I said. There's no broadcast that could be picked up out here, especially not one with children's songs. Eddie's face had gone pale. Those are the Jensen kids' voices. I've heard them singing at the visitor center before. We stared at each other, the impossible truth hanging in the air between us. Those children couldn't be broadcasting on our radio frequency. It just wasn't possible. We set up camp as darkness fell, no one wanting to admit how scared we were. Judy kept her camera close, taking photos of the darkening woods every few minutes, like she was trying to catch something moving out there. It was near midnight when we heard it. A child's laugh, clear as day, circling our camp. First from the north, then the east, then south, then west, moving faster than any human could run through the dense forest. It's just the wind, Dr. Hoffman said, but his voice shook. No, Eddie whispered. That's what my grandmother warned about. She called it the hungry one, said it walks in winter, even when it shouldn't be winter. What does it want? Judy asked, her camera forgotten in her lap. Eddie looked at each of us, his eyes wide with fear. It's always hungry. That's all it knows. Hunger. And it especially loves the taste of fear. I tried to keep my voice steady, to be the calm leader they needed. Everyone get some sleep. I'll take first watch. But as they crawled into their tents, I sat by our dying fire, listening to that laugh fade away into the distance, replaced by what sounded like whispers just beyond the edge of hearing. I checked my pistol again and wrapped my fingers around my brother's dog tags. Whatever was out there, I had a terrible feeling it was just getting started with us. I woke everyone at first light, though woke isn't quite right. None of us had really slept. The cold had gotten worse overnight, our breath making thick clouds. In the morning air, "Where's Eddie?" Judy asked, looking around our small camp. My stomach dropped. Eddie's tent was empty, his sleeping bag still neatly rolled inside. "He mentioned scouting ahead," Dr. Hoffman said. "I heard him leave just before dawn." I checked my watch. That was over 2 hours ago. Eddie knew better than to go off alone for that long without checking in. We packed quickly, leaving most of our gear behind. I found Eddie's tracks leading west and followed them, Judy and Dr. Hoffman close behind me. The tracks were clear at first, Eddie's familiar boot prints in the soft earth. Then they started to get strange, deeper, like he'd been running, zigzagging between trees. About a half-mile from camp, we found his backpack hanging from a low branch. Inside was his journal. I flipped to the last entry dated that morning. Fee 15am, can't sleep. Hearing things. Going to check out the ridge to the west. Something feels wrong about this whole search. The whispers won't stop. It's talking to me using my mother's voice. But Mum's been dead for 3 years. I closed the journal, trying to hide the shake in my hands. We need to find him now. That's when the weather changed. 1 minute the sky was clear, the next it was filled with dark clouds that seemed to roll in from nowhere. The temperature plummeted. I watched the needle on my watch thermometer drop from 40 degrees to near 0 in minutes. Then the snow started. Thick, heavy flakes that quickly covered the ground. "This isn't possible," Dr. Hoffman shouted over the sudden howl of wind. The forecast was clear all week. The blizzard hit us like a truck. Within minutes, we could barely see 10 feet ahead. The world became a swirling white void. "Stay together," I yelled, grabbing Judy's sleeve. But when I turned to make sure Dr. Hoffman was following, he was gone, swallowed by the white. "Hoffman," I called, my voice snatched away by the wind. "We have to find shelter," Judy shouted, her face already red from the cold. We stumbled forward, the snow already ankle-deep. Suddenly, Judy stopped, pointing ahead. "There, I see something." Through the curtain of snow, I could just make out a dark shape on the ground. As we got closer, my heart sank. It was Eddie. He lay face up in the snow, his eyes open and frozen, his mouth locked in a silent scream. His jacket and shirt were torn open, and his stomach... God, his stomach was empty. Something had removed his organs, leaving a hollow cavity that was now filling with snow. Judy turned away and vomited. I knelt beside Eddie's body, my medic training kicking in, even though I knew he was far beyond help. There were strange marks around the wound. Not knife cuts or animal bites, but long, thin scratches like someone with enormous fingers had scooped out his insides. "We need to get out of here," I said, getting to my feet. "Now!" "Wait," Judy said weakly, wiping her mouth. "His camera!" Eddie always carried a disposable camera. She was right, Eddie documented all his hikes. I searched his pockets and found the small yellow camera. Most of the photos would be useless to us now, but maybe there'd be something that could explain what happened to him. The blizzard was getting worse. We couldn't stay with Eddie's body, and we had no way to carry him in these conditions. I said a quick prayer over him, promising to come back, and we pushed on. We found a fallen log big enough to create a small shelter from the wind. Huddled together for warmth, we waited for the storm to pass. That's when Judy remembered her own camera. "I've been taking pictures all morning," she said, her teeth chattering. "Maybe there's something that can help us." We scrolled through the images, mostly blurry shots of trees and snow. Then we came to the last one, taken just before we found Eddie. My blood turned to ice. The photo showed me kneeling to check a track in the snow, but behind me, just visible between the trees, stood a tall, impossibly thin figure. It had to be at least 9 feet tall, with skin stretched tight over visible bones and long branch-like limbs. Worst of all were the antlers, not like a deer's, but twisted wrong somehow, growing directly from what should have been its human-like skull. "What is that?" Judy whispered, her voice cracking. I had no answer. All I knew was that the thing had been right behind me, and I'd never sensed it, never heard it, never felt it watching me. And now Eddie was dead, Dr. Hoffman was missing, and we were trapped in an impossible blizzard with that thing hunting us. "We need to find the ranger station," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "It's our only chance." But as the daylight faded and the storm raged on, I knew our chances of making it through the night were getting slimmer by the minute. The cold was seeping into my bones, and the whispers I'd been hearing since we found the Jensen campsite were getting louder, more insistent. Sometimes they sounded like Eddie now. Sometimes they sounded like my brother dying in Korea. As darkness fell completely, Judy clutched my arm and pointed silently into the swirling snow. 2 pinpricks of light, like eyes reflecting our flashlight, watched us from the darkness, too high up to be any animal I knew. They blinked once, then vanished. We were being hunted, and our hunter was patient. The storm broke just before dawn. Judy and I crawled out from our makeshift shelter, stiff and half frozen. The forest looked alien under its blanket of snow. All wrong for early spring in this part of Washington. "We need to find the ranger station," I said, my voice rough from the cold, but which way? The blizzard had covered our tracks and changed the landscape. Nothing looked familiar. That's when it started. The sounds. At first, I thought it was the wind playing tricks, but then I heard it clearly. Machine gun fire, distant explosions, men shouting orders, the sounds of Korea. "Do you hear that?" I asked Judy, my heart racing. She looked at me strangely. "Hear what? It's dead quiet." The sounds were coming from inside my head. Somehow, whatever was hunting us knew my worst memories and was using them against me. Then came the screams, the exact screams of men I'd tried to save on the battlefield. Voices begging me not to let them die. My brother's voice, calling my name just like he had before the mortar hit. I pressed my hands against my ears, but it didn't help. The screams were inside my head. "Thomas, what's wrong?" Judy grabbed my arm, her face worried. I couldn't explain. How could I tell her that the thing hunting us was using my own broken mind as a weapon? We need shelter, I managed to say. Somewhere. Defensible. That's when I remembered. There was an old fire lookout tower a few miles north of where we found Eddie. If we could reach it, we'd have walls around us, a door that locked, and a radio that might still work. We trudged through knee-deep. Snow for hours. The voices in my head got worse, sometimes whispering, sometimes screaming. I started seeing things too. Flashes of movement at the edge of my vision, shapes that vanished when I turned to look. Twice I spotted a tall, skeletal figure watching us from between distant trees. Each time I pointed it out to Judy, it was gone by the time she looked. "You're scaring me, Thomas," she said after the second time. "I don't see anyone out there." Late in the afternoon, we finally spotted the lookout tower, a wooden structure standing about 40 feet high on stilts. It had been abandoned years ago when newer ones were built, but it should still offer some protection. The climb up the rickety steps nearly finished us both. Inside, the small room was dusty but intact. Windows on all four sides gave a clear view of the surrounding forest. An old potbelly stove sat in one corner, and there was a cabinet that might hold supplies. "Check the radio," I told Judy, pointing to the old unit on the desk. While she fiddled with dials, I searched the cabinet. Canned food, matches, a first aid kit, all covered in dust but usable. Under a tarp in the corner, I found a small camp. Ed. Then I spotted a book on the desk, an old leather journal. I opened it and felt a chill run down my spine. The journal was dated 1887, written by a Forest Service worker named Jonathan Mills. The entries told a story eerily similar to ours. March 15th, 1887. Something is hunting in these woods. Found. The Wallace family camp abandoned. Strange marks on trees. Children's toys arranged in a circle. March 18th. Jennings went missing this morning. Found what was left of him at dusk. Something had removed his organs. The cold is unnatural. The final entry made my hands shake. March 20th. It speaks with the voices of those it has taken. Pastor Williams calls it a Wendigo, an ancient spirit corrupted by cannibalism. It hunts every 70 years when the winter lingers too long. God help us. It's outside the tower now. 70 years. From 1887 to 1957. Exactly 70 years. "The radio's dead," Judy said, turning to me. "What's that?" I handed her the journal. As she read, her face went pale. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Some local playing a trick." The sun was setting now, casting long shadows through the trees. That's when I saw him, my brother, standing at the edge of the clearing below, waving up at me. He looked exactly like the last time I saw him alive in his battle fatigues, that cocky smile on his face. "David," I whispered, moving to the window. "Who are you talking to?" Judy asked, alarm in her voice. "There's nobody there, Thomas," but I could see him clearly. David was calling up to me, though I couldn't hear his voice. He wanted me to come down. I moved toward the door, but Judy grabbed my arm. "Don't! It's not real, Thomas. It's the thing using your memories." Part of me knew she was right, but God, he looked so real, so alive. A noise from below the trap door, in the floor, made us both freeze. Soft whimpering, like a child crying. Judy grabbed a rusted fire poker from beside the stove. I drew my pistol. Slowly, I pulled open the trap door. In the small storage space below, huddled together in the darkness, were two children, a boy about 10 and a girl maybe 7. Their clothes were torn and dirty, their faces streaked with tears and dirt. "The Jensen children! Oh my God," Judy breathed. "You're alive!" The children didn't respond. They stared at us with wide, frightened eyes, but didn't speak or move. I helped them up into the tower. They were ice cold but uninjured. In shock, probably. "Where are your parents?" I asked gently. The boy just shook his head. I wrapped them in blankets and set them by the stove, which Judy had managed to light with wood stored below. The tower warmed quickly. As night fell completely, the whispers outside grew louder. Sometimes they sounded like Eddie, sometimes like Dr. Hoffman, sometimes like voices I didn't recognize, maybe the Jensen parents. The children huddled closer together each time the voices changed. They knew. They'd seen what took their parents. "We'll get you home safe," I promised them, though I wasn't sure how we'd make it through the night, let alone back to civilization. Outside, something moved in the darkness beneath the tower. Something tall and hungry that knew all our fears and how to use them against us. I checked my pistol again, though I was starting to think bullets wouldn't help against what waited outside. We needed morning to come. We needed a plan. But most of all, we needed to survive the night with our sanity intact. None of us slept. The children huddled together by the stove, while Judy and I took turns watching the windows. The voices outside never stopped, sometimes whispering, sometimes calling our names, using voices of people we knew. As the first grey light of dawn appeared, I made a decision. "We need to move," I told Judy. "The ranger station is about 5 miles southeast. If we push hard, we might make it by nightfall." Judy looked at the children, who still hadn't spoken a word. "Can they make it that far?" "They have to," I said. "We can't stay here another night." We gathered what supplies we could carry: food, matches, the first aid kit. I gave the boy my spare knife, which seemed to comfort him a little. The climb down from the tower was tense. Every creak of the wooden steps made my heart jump. I kept seeing movement in the trees, tall, thin shapes that vanished when I tried to focus on them. At the bottom, I found tracks in the snow around the tower's base. Not animal tracks, not human either. Long, bony feet with too many toes had circled the tower all night. We headed southeast, moving as fast as we could with the children. The boy held his sister's hand tightly, pulling her along when she got tired. They were tough kids. They'd survived somehow when their parents hadn't. About 2 miles from the tower, we found the bones. Hundreds of them, arranged in strange patterns. On the ground, circles and spirals and shapes I didn't recognize. Human bones, old and new, bleached white or still stained with blood. "Don't look," I told the children, but they didn't seem surprised. They'd seen this before. "What is this place?" Judy whispered, her camera forgotten at her side. "It's where it keeps them," the boy said suddenly, his voice faint from disuse. "The people it takes." It was the first time he'd spoken. His sister tugged on his sleeve, shaking her head frantically as if warning him to be quiet. "What is it?" I asked gently. "What's hunting us?" The boy looked around fearfully, then whispered, "The hungry one. It's always hungry. It eats everything, not just bodies, memories, fear, pain." His sister suddenly grabbed my hand and the boys, pulling us away from the bone yard. Her eyes were wide with terror. We continued southeast, but something strange was happening. The forest paths kept looping back, bringing us to places we'd already passed. It was like the woods themselves were changing around us. "We're going in circles," Judy said after the 3rd time we passed the same fallen log. My head was pounding. I hadn't slept properly in days, and the micro-sleeps were getting worse, seconds or minutes where I'd zone out completely, sometimes while still walking. Perfect hunting opportunities. During one of these episodes, I saw my brother again. This time he wasn't smiling. "You left me to die," he said, blood running from his mouth. "Now you'll join me." I jerked awake to find myself standing at the edge of a steep ravine, one step away from falling. Judy was grabbing my jacket, pulling me. "Back, Thomas, wake up!" she was shouting. The children were watching me with those hollow eyes. Then suddenly, they both spoke in perfect unison, their voices flat and strange. "It was a man once, long ago. When winter came and food ran out, he ate his family to survive. The forest spirit punished him by making his hunger eternal. Every 70 years, when the old spirits wake, it hunts again." Their eyes rolled back in their heads for a moment, then returned to normal. The girl started crying silently. The boy looked ashamed, like he hadn't meant to speak those words. How do we stop it? I asked. You don't, the boy whispered. You can only escape. By mid-afternoon, we reached a small clearing. The trees around it were ancient, massive trunks scarred with claw marks that went all the way up to branches 30 feet overhead. Some of the marks looked decades old, others fresh. This is wrong, Judy said, looking at her compass. We should have reached the ranger station by now. That's when I realized the truth. We weren't lost. It was leading us here. This clearing was where it wanted us to be. The temperature plummeted suddenly. Our breath came out in thick clouds. The children moved closer to me, each taking one of my hands. The forest went completely silent. Not a bird, not a breeze, nothing. Then I heard the battlefield again, the rat-tat-tat of machine gun fire, the screams of the wounded. But this time, it wasn't just in my head. Judy could hear it too, her eyes wide with fear. What is that? She gasped. The ground began to freeze beneath our feet. Ice crystals spread across the clearing, crackling as they grew. And there it was, standing at the far edge of the clearing, 9 feet tall at least. Its grey skin stretched tight over a skeletal frame. Antlers sprouted from its skull like twisted branches. Its fingers were impossibly long, ending in sharp, bone-like claws. Its mouth hung open, showing rows of needle-like teeth. But its eyes were the worst part. Human eyes in that inhuman face, filled with hunger and ancient hatred. "Run!" I whispered to Judy and the children. "I'll hold it off. Head west until you find the river. It can't cross running water." "How do you know that?" Judy asked, clutching her camera like a shield. "The journal," I said. "And the boy told me go now." The Wendigo took a step forward, its movements jerky and wrong, like watching a spider walk. It opened its mouth wider than any human mouth could open and let out a sound. Not a roar or a scream, but a collection of voices all crying out at once. I heard Eddie in there, and Dr. Hoffman and the Jensen parents. I pulled out my pistol and fired twice. The bullets hit it square in the chest, but it didn't even flinch. It just cocked its head like it was curious about the noise. "Go!" I shouted at the others. Judy grabbed the children's hands and ran west. The Wendigo's attention stayed on me. It took another step forward, and suddenly the clearing was gone. I was back in Korea, kneeling beside my dying brother in the mud, while bullets flew overhead. "You let me die," David's voice said, but it was coming from the Wendigo's mouth. "You're not real," I told it, backing away. "You're not my brother." It changed tactics, its form shifting. Now it looked like Eddie, his stomach torn open, organs missing. "Why didn't you protect me, Thomas?" Eddie's voice asked. "I trusted you. I knew it was trying to paralyze me with guilt and fear." That was how it hunted. It trapped you in your own personal hell until you couldn't run anymore. I had one flare in my pocket and my silver pocket knife, the one I'd carried through Korea. Silver. The journal had mentioned silver as a weakness. The Wendigo lunged suddenly, faster than anything that size should be able to move. I dodged, but its claws caught my shoulder, ripping through my jacket and into flesh. The pain was shocking. Not just physical pain, but a deep, cold burning that seemed to reach into my soul. I fell, rolling away as it swiped at me again. My hand closed around the flare. I struck it against the ground, and it burst to life with a bright red flame. The Wendigo shrieked, a sound like metal tearing, and backed away from the fire. I waved the flare between us, and it retreated further. I got to my feet, keeping the flare extended. The Wendigo circled me, looking for an opening. I could feel blood running down my arm from my shoulder wound. The cold was getting worse, making it hard to think clearly. The flare wouldn't last long. I needed to run, to find Judy and the children, to reach the river. I threw the flare directly at the Wendigo's face and took off, running west. Behind me, I heard it shriek again, then the sound of it crashing through the undergrowth in pursuit. Ran harder than I'd ever run in my life. The trees whipped past me, branches scratching my face. I could hear it gaining on me, its breathing, a wet, hungry sound. Then I heard water, the rush of the river ahead. I pushed myself, legs burning, lungs screaming for air. The Wendigo's hand closed around my left wrist, its grip like ice. It yanked me backward, and I felt my shoulder dislocate with a pop. The pain made my vision blur. I twisted, facing it. Up close, its face was worse. Not quite animal, not quite human, ancient and terrible. Its mouth opened, impossibly wide, ready to feed. With my right hand, I pulled out my silver knife and stabbed upward, burying the blade in its throat. The Wendigo let out a sound like nothing I've ever heard, a high, thin wail that seemed to echo from everywhere at once. Its grip on my wrist tightened, the cold so intense I could feel my flesh freezing. I knew in that moment I wouldn't get my hand back. So I did the only thing I could. I twisted the knife deeper, then wrenched myself away, leaving flesh and bone behind. The pain was blinding, but somehow I kept moving, stumbling forward as the Wendigo clawed at the silver in its throat. I broke through the trees and saw the river, fast-moving water, swollen with spring melt. On the far bank stood Judy and the children, their faces white with fear. The boy was pointing frantically at something behind me. I didn't look back. I threw myself into the rushing water, the cold shocking what was left of my senses. The current grabbed me, pulling me downstream. My left arm ended in ragged flesh now, blood swirling in the water around me. The last thing I remember before passing out was the Wendigo's scream of rage from the bank behind me and the feeling of hands pulling me from the water on the far side. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. My left hand was gone, amputated properly now by surgeons who told me I'd lost it in a wildlife attack. That's what the official report said anyway. The rangers had found us half a mile downstream from where I'd crossed the river. Judy had dragged me from the water with the help of some hikers who'd heard her screams. The children had guided them, all to a trail that led straight to the ranger station, a trail that hadn't seemed to exist when we were being hunted. Chief Doyle came to see me on my 4th day in the hospital. His face was grim as he pulled up a chair beside my bed. Found Klein's camera in her pack, he said without greeting. Had the film developed? He handed me a stack of photos. Most were what you'd expect. Forest scenes, our camp, Eddie smiling. Beside his tent. Then came the ones that made my blood run cold. Clear shots of the Wendigo watching us from between trees. One showed it standing directly behind me, close enough to touch, its long fingers reaching for my shoulder. "What do you make of these?" Doyle asked, his voice carefully neutral. "You know what they are," I said. There was no point lying to him. He nodded slowly. "Search party found Klein yesterday, or parts of her." He took a deep breath. Her head was mounted on a branch near that old fire lookout tower, eyes and tongue removed. I closed my eyes, trying to push away the image. Poor Judy. She'd been so brave, getting the children to safety. And Dr. Hoffman, still missing, Doyle said. Not expecting to find much at this point. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "The Jensen kids haven't spoken a word since we found them. Doctors say it's trauma. They just sit and draw pictures all day." "Pictures of what?" I asked, though I already knew. Doyle reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, a child's drawing of a tall, thin figure with antlers, standing at the edge of a forest, watching. "The parents?" I asked. "No sign. Case will stay open, but..." He shrugged. "We both knew they weren't coming back. What about the bones we found? The clearing with all the remains?" Doyle looked uncomfortable. "Search party can't find it. Say you must have been confused from blood loss." But his eyes told a different story. He believed me. Maybe he'd seen things in these woods too, things he couldn't explain. "The kids will recover," he said, standing to leave. "Young minds are resilient. They might even forget eventually." I doubted that. Some things you don't forget, no matter how young you are or how much you want to. "What about you, Harmon? What will you do now?" Doyle asked. I looked down at the bandaged stump where my left hand had been. Heal up, move on. But I knew I wouldn't move far. Something kept me tied to these woods now. 5 years passed. I stayed. on as a ranger, though I mostly worked the station now. The missing hand made field work difficult, though I managed when needed. The nightmares about career faded, replaced by new ones about tall, thin figures watching from between trees. I visited the Jensen children once. They lived with an aunt in Seattle. They seemed happy enough, normal even, but when they saw me, something flickered in their eyes. Recognition, fear. The boy asked me if I still heard the whispers. I told him no, even though it wasn't true. Anon. Cold nights, I can feel a phantom pain where my left hand should be. Sometimes it feels like my fingers are stretching, growing longer, the bones pushing against invisible skin. I've developed a strange new sense since my encounter in the woods. I can feel cold spots where no cold should be. I hear whispers that others don't, fragments of conversations from people who aren't there. Last winter, I found claw marks on trees near my cabin, high up, higher than any animal could reach, and tracks in the fresh snow with too many toes, too long in the arch, 70 years. That's what the journal said. The Wendigo hunts every 70 years when the winter lingers too long. But I don't think it's waiting this time. I think it marked. Me somehow left something of itself inside me when it took my hand. Sometimes I wake up in the night, miles from my cabin, with no memory of how I got there. My remaining hand dirty, covered in soil from digging. Once I found blood under my fingernails. That wasn't mine. And last night, for the first time, I heard my own voice whispering outside my window. Not my voice as it is now, but as it will be, hungry and cold and ancient. I've loaded my pistol with silver bullets. I've written down everything that happened 5 years ago, sealed it in an envelope addressed to Chief Doyle. Tonight is the 5th anniversary of our encounter in the woods. The temperature has dropped suddenly, though it's midsummer. My breath fogs in front of me as I write these final words. There's a tall shadow moving outside my window now. I can see antlers silhouetted against the moonlight, but I'm not afraid anymore. I think I've known all along that it wasn't finished with me, that I didn't escape that day in the woods. I just brought something back with me, something hungry that's been growing inside me all this time. The whispers are louder now, and the hunger, God, the hunger is worst of all. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. And if you're smart, you'll stay away from the ancient parts of Olympic National Park when winter lingers too long and the fog rolls thick through the valleys, because something walks in those woods. Something that was once a man before hunger changed him into something else. And it's always, always hungry. I still remember the first time I saw someone frozen from the inside out. Some things you can't unsee, no matter how hard you try. My name is Jack Calhoun, and I've been a ranger at White Mountain National Forest for almost 20 years now. I know every trail, every rock, and every tree in these woods. At least, I thought I did, until last summer, when everything I believed about the natural world was turned upside down. It was July, and the forest was alive with hikers enjoying the warm sunshine. The temperature had been holding steady in the mid-80s for weeks. Perfect summer weather. My daughter Ellie was coming to stay with me for the season, something I both looked forward to and dreaded. Since her mother died giving birth to her, it's just been the two of us, and I've never quite figured out how to be the dad she deserves. The morning everything started, I was checking supplies in my cabin. I carry Sarah's compact mirror everywhere. I go, a small silver thing with her initials engraved on it. When I'm stressed, I find myself opening and closing it without even realizing. That morning, I must have opened and closed it 50 times. The radio crackled to life on my belt. Jack, we've got a situation at Devil's Pond. Hiker found something unusual. Better get over there. It was Marcus Tompkins, my fellow ranger, and probably the only real friend I have these days. On my way, I answered, grabbing my jacket out. Of habit, then putting it back. Who needs a jacket in July? Turns out I should have brought it. When I arrived at Devil's Pond, Marcus was standing over something covered with a tarp. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking slightly. Marcus had done 2 tours in Vietnam. Nothing shook him. "What have we got?" I asked, already feeling a chill that made no sense. "See for yourself," he said, pulling back the tarp. The man underneath was frozen solid, not cold, not blue-lipped, but frozen, like a statue made of ice. His eyes were wide with terror, and delicate frost patterns like tiny ferns spread across his skin. The air around him felt wrong, unnaturally cold, despite the summer sun beating down through the trees. "This is impossible," I said, reaching out to touch the body, then pulling back when my fingertips burned with cold. "It's 85 degrees today." "Check this out," Marcus said, holding up my digital thermometer. As he moved it closer to the body, the numbers plunged from 85 to 30, then 0, then kept dropping until it read 40 before the screen went blank. "Equipment malfunction," I said firmly, though my heart was racing. There had to be a logical explanation. "There always is. The medical examiner is on his way," Marcus said. "Park Service wants this kept quiet, tourism season and all." I nodded but couldn't take my eyes off those frost patterns. They seemed to move if I looked at them too long, like they were alive somehow. "One more thing," Marcus added, his voice lower now. "The hikers who found him said they heard a woman crying just before they discovered the body. Said it sounded like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once." I was about to dismiss this when the wind picked up, whistling through the trees with a sound that raised the hair on my arms. For just a second, it sounded almost like a woman's voice, calling out a name I couldn't quite catch. "It's just the wind," I said, more to myself than to Marcus. But as we waited for the medical examiner, I found myself opening and closing Sarah's compact mirror again and again, watching my breath fog the surface despite the summer heat. Something was very wrong in my forest, and I had a terrible feeling this was just the beginning. By the time the medical examiner arrived, a small crowd had gathered. I sent Marcus to keep the hikers away while I talked to Dr. Simmons. "Never seen anything like this in 30 years, Simmons muttered as he examined the frozen man. "It's like he froze from the inside out. That's not how hypothermia works." "Could it be some kind of chemical exposure?" I asked, grasping for any normal explanation. Simmons shook his head. "The frost patterns are too deliberate. And look at his eyes, Jack. What did this man see before he died?" I didn't want to think about that. Instead, I helped load the body into the medical van and headed back to the ranger station to file my report. I need to stick to the facts, even if they made no sense. The phone was ringing when I got there. It was Ellie. "Dad, my bus gets in at 4. You're still picking me up, right?" Her voice brought me back to reality. "Of course, honey, I'll be there," I promised, checking my watch. The day was already slipping away from me. After filing the strangest report of my career, I drove to the bus station in town. Seeing Ellie step off that bus, backpack slung over one shoulder, made me realize how much she'd grown in the past year. At 15, she looked more like her mother every day. "How's my forest ranger?" she asked, giving me a quick hug. "Better now," I said, meaning it. "How was the trip?" As we drove back to my cabin, Ellie filled me in on school and friends. I half listened, my mind still stuck on that frozen body and those impossible frost patterns. "Dad, are you even listening?" Ellie's voice snapped me back. "Sorry, honey, tough day at work." Her eyes lit up. "Something interesting? All you ever talk about is bear safety and lost hikers." I hesitated. "Just an unusual situation. Nothing for you to worry about." Back at the cabin, I made Ellie's favorite dinner, spaghetti with too much cheese, while she unpacked in her room. Things felt almost normal for a while. After dinner, my boss called. "Calhoun, we need to keep this quiet," he said, without bothering with hello. "Tourist season just started, and we can't have people thinking there's some kind of danger in the park." What am I supposed to tell people? A man froze to death in 85-degree weather. Tell them it was a medical condition, anaphylactic shock or something. Dr. Simmons will back us up. I didn't like lying, but I also didn't have a better explanation. Yes, sir. After hanging up, I found Ellie looking through my bookshelf. Dad, do you have any books about local legends? For a summer project, she added quickly. Check the bottom shelf. There's some local history stuff. While Ellie read, I pulled out the case file again. Something about those frost patterns seemed familiar. I'd seen them somewhere before. Outside, the summer night was warm and filled with cricket sounds, but inside, I felt a strange chill. When I went to close the windows, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was frost forming on the inside of the glass. Delicate patterns, just like on the dead man's skin. That's weird, Ellie said, suddenly beside me. It's like super hot tonight. I quickly closed the curtains. Just a trick of the light. Time for bed, kiddo. Later, after Ellie was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with an old book from the ranger station archives. Inside were accounts of strange deaths in these mountains, dating back to the 1700s. Deaths where the victims were found frozen solid in warm weather. The wind picked up outside, whistling around the cabin corners. For a second, it sounded like a woman singing a sad, lonely song. I found myself opening Sarah's compact mirror again, watching my breath fog the surface. When I wiped it away, I could have sworn I saw a face behind me that wasn't my own. A pale, blue-tinged face with eyes like pinpricks of light. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just the darkness and the sound of the wind. Or maybe it was crying. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning I took Ellie into town for breakfast at the local diner. I needed coffee badly after my sleepless night, and I wanted to introduce her to some normal people before diving back into whatever was happening in my forest. You look terrible, Dad, Ellie said, studying my face over her pancakes. Thanks, honey. Just didn't sleep well. Was it because of the frost on the windows? Because that was really weird. Before I could answer, an older man approached our table. He had white hair and wore a tweed jacket despite the summer heat. Ranger Calhoun, Howard Fletcher. I'm the local historian. Mind if I join you? I was about to say we were having a family breakfast when Ellie piped up. Are you the one who wrote the book about White Mountain legends? I just started reading it. Fletcher beamed at her. I am indeed, and you must be Eleanor. Just Ellie, she corrected. I sighed and made room. What can I do for you, Mr. Fletcher? His face grew serious. I heard about what happened yesterday. The frozen hiker. I glanced at Ellie, who was suddenly very interested. How did you hear about that? Small town. Fletcher shrugged. But it's not the first time this has happened. Now he had my full attention. What do you mean? Fletcher pulled an old leather folder from his bag and opened it on the table. Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings and what looked like pages from old journals. Every 20 to 30 years, someone freezes to death in these mountains during warm weather. The first recorded case was in 1726, when a trapper was found solid as winter ice in the midst of summer bloom, according to this journal. He pointed to a faded page written in careful script. That could mean anything, I said. But I felt a chill run down my spine. Each victim shows the same strange frost patterns on their skin, Fletcher continued, showing me a sketch from the 1800s that looked exactly like what I'd seen yesterday. And local people have always blamed her. Her? Ellie asked eagerly. The Winter Woman, or Ice Woman, depending on who's telling the story. Fletcher lowered his voice. She was accused of witchcraft in 1721 and left to die in the winter cold. They say her spirit still walks these mountains, freezing those who cross her path. I pushed back from the table. That's just a ghost story. Maybe, Fletcher said, but ghost stories often have truth at their core. After breakfast, I dropped Ellie at the library, where she promptly joined Fletcher to look through more historical records and headed to the ranger station. I had barely sat down at my desk when Marcus burst in. There's a Dr. Winters here to see you. Says she's a meteorologist studying the unusual cold spots. A woman followed him in. She was about my age, with short dark hair and serious eyes. Doctor, Rebecca Winters, she said, extending her hand. I've been tracking unusual weather patterns across New England. Your frozen hiker case fits the profile. What profile? I asked, gesturing for her to sit. Localized cold spots that defy normal. Weather physics. Areas where the temperature suddenly drops 60 degrees or more with no meteorological explanation. She opened her laptop and showed me a map with colored dots. Each dot represents an anomaly. They've been increasing over the past month, all centered around White Mountain. What causes it? That's what I'm here to find out. Could be anything. From geological factors releasing trapped gases to, well, something less conventional. Like a ghost? I said with a half smile. She didn't smile back. Like something science hasn't properly catalogued yet. We agreed to check her equipment at Devil's Pond, where the hiker was found. As we drove there, Dr. Winters told me about similar cases she'd investigated. None were this severe, she admitted. Usually it's just unexplained cold spots, not actual freezing deaths. At the pond, her equipment went haywire. Sensors showing impossible temperature variations, compasses spinning wildly. There's some kind of energy field here, she murmured. Adjusting dials, like nothing I've ever seen. That's when my radio crackled. It was Ellie. Dad? Her voice sounded small. Dad, there's someone watching me at the library. Mr. Fletcher, I asked. No, he went to get lunch. It's... Dad, I think it's a woman. She's standing outside in a white dress. She keeps staring at me through the window. I'll be right there, I said, already heading for my truck. When I got to the library, Ellie was waiting outside, looking pale. She's gone now, she said as I pulled up. But Dad, she wasn't normal. Her skin was blue like... She was frozen. And her hair, it moved like it was underwater. I hugged her tight, feeling my heart race. It was probably just someone playing a joke. But back at home that evening, I found a journal from 1943 in the Ranger Station archives. It described identical frost patterns found on a frozen body in July of that year. And just as I closed the book, my phone rang. It was Marcus. Jack, you need to come quick. We found another one. The second victim was a teenage boy, frozen solid in his sleeping bag at the campground. His face was frozen in an expression that looked almost happy. Frost patterns covered. His skin more elaborate than the first victim's. That night, as Ellie slept, I sat on my porch and watched the temperature gauge. At exactly midnight, it dropped from 78 degrees to 32 in less than a minute. The air around my cabin frosted over, patterns forming on every surface. And somewhere in the trees, I heard a woman crying. Morning brought sunshine and warmth, as if the midnight frost had been nothing but a bad dream, but I knew better. I'd taken photos of the frost patterns on my porch railing before they melted away with the dawn. Dr. Winters arrived early, carrying what looked like a small TV weather station. It's a cold spot detector, she explained, setting it up on my kitchen table. It can track moving temperature changes and record them. Moving? I asked, pouring coffee for both of us. Yesterday's readings suggest whatever is causing the cold isn't staying in one place. It's moving around the forest, following some kind of pattern. She tapped on her tablet, showing me a map with blue lines crisscrossing through the forest. These are the paths of the cold spots over the last 48 hours. I leaned closer. The pattern wasn't random. It looked almost like... It's a search pattern, I said. Like someone or something is looking for something. The lights flickered, then went out. Power outage? Dr. Winters asked. I shook my head. We have backup generators that kick in automatically. I grabbed my flashlight. I'll check the breaker box outside. The morning was bright and warm, which made what I found at the breaker box all the more disturbing. The metal door was covered in frost. The same delicate fern patterns. When I opened it, ice had formed inside, covering all the switches. But the ice was moving, growing, crawling upward against gravity. I slammed the box shut and ran back inside. We need to get to the ranger station, now. Dr. Winters didn't ask questions. We left a note for Ellie, who was still sleeping, and drove to the station. Marcus was already there with 3 park employees huddled around the coffee machine. "Power's out across the whole northern section," he reported. "And the phones are dead too." I pulled him aside. "The ice in my breaker box was moving, Marcus, growing against gravity." To his credit, he didn't laugh or call me crazy. "I've been seeing things too, Jack. Last night outside my cabin window, a woman in white watching me. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. We need to find out what's happening." Dr. Winters set up her equipment at the station. Soon, a small crowd gathered. Rangers, the local sheriff, even the mayor, who was worried about tourist season. "These cold spots are getting stronger and more frequent," Dr. Winters explained, pointing to her screens, "and they all originate from this area." She circled a section of forest about 5 miles from my cabin. "Devil's Pond," Marcus said, "where we found the first victim." The mayor looked nervous. "But what's causing it?" Before anyone could answer, Ellie burst into the station, cheeks flushed from running. "Dad, you've got to see what Mr. Fletcher and I found." She spread old newspapers across a desk. Headlines dating back decades. Mysterious freeze claims local teenager. Camp counselor found frozen in July heat. Winter death in summer woods. "They all follow the same pattern," Ellie explained, excited despite the grim subject. "Every 3rd cycle she takes a young woman." "She?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The Ice Woman. And Dad." Her voice dropped. "We're in the 3rd cycle right now." The entire room fell silent. "That's not all," Ellie continued. "Mr. Fletcher found these." She pulled out photocopies of old photographs. Most were just blurry landscape shots of the forest from different eras. But when she pointed to the background of each one, my blood ran cold. In every photo, barely visible among the trees, was the silhouette of a woman in white. "Mr. Fletcher says she's real," Ellie said, "and he should know. His great-grandmother was the one they accused of being a witch." Dr. Winters looked skeptical but intrigued. "These cold spots do seem to have some kind of intelligence to them. They're not random." Marcus pulled me aside. "Jack, have you checked the mirrors at your place?" "What about them?" "The mirrors in my cabin. They're showing frost patterns on the inside of the glass." Back at my cabin that afternoon, I found he was right. Every mirror had delicate frost patterns forming on them, including Sarah's compact mirror I always carried. The patterns seemed to form shapes, almost like words. While the adults debated science versus folklore at the station, Ellie had slipped away to the library again. She called me just as the sun was setting. "Dad," her voice sounded strange. I saw her again. The Blue Lady. She was standing by the old mining shaft where Mr. Fletcher says they imprisoned his great-grandmother. "Where are you now?" I asked, already grabbing my keys. "With Mr. Fletcher. He says she's trying to communicate. Through me." "Stay where you are," I shouted. "I'm coming to get you." I raced to the library, heart pounding. When I got there, I found Ellie sitting calmly with Fletcher, looking through more old books. "Dad, I know this sounds crazy, but I think I know what she wants," Ellie said. "Not now, Ellie. We're going home. But Dad, now, Ellie." As I drove us home, the temperature in the car dropped suddenly. The windows frosted over, and I had to scrape ice just to see the road. In July. "She's calling to me," Ellie whispered, her breath coming out in visible puffs. Every night in my dreams. That night after Ellie went to bed, I sat in the kitchen with Sarah's compact open in front of me. The frost patterns on the mirror's surface were definitely forming words now. "Send the daughter." And as I watched, horrified, the frost on the windows began to take the shape of a woman's face, hollow-eyed and screaming silently. Outside, the temperature plummeted as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. I barely slept that night, checking on Ellie every hour. Each time, her room felt colder than the rest of the house, though the thermometer showed normal July temperatures. Round dawn, I finally dozed off in the chair beside her bed. The ringing phone jerked me awake. Jack. It was the sheriff, his voice tight. "You need to get over to Tompkins' cabin, now." My stomach dropped. "Marcus, what happened?" "Just get over here." 20 minutes later, I parked outside Marcus's small ranger cabin. Police cars and an ambulance sat with lights flashing. Sheriff Davis met me at the door, his face grim. "I wouldn't go in there if I were you, Jack, but I had to see." Marcus was sitting in his favorite chair, frozen solid. His skin had turned blue-white, with those same fern-like frost patterns spreading across his face. His eyes were wide open. He filled with pure terror. One hand was stretched out in front of him, as if trying to push something away. "Found him like this an hour ago, when he didn't show for morning patrol," the sheriff said. "Temperature in there is normal. Heating's on. Makes no scientific sense." I touched Marcus's shoulder. "Solid ice, my best friend." "I'm sorry, Jack," the sheriff said quietly. Back home, I found Ellie sitting at the kitchen table looking pale. She held a steaming cup of tea between her hands, as if trying to warm them. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling, "I don't feel good." I rushed to her side and felt her forehead, ice cold. "I keep seeing her in my dreams," Ellie whispered. "She stands at the foot of my bed and calls my name. She says she's been waiting for me." Fear gripped my heart. "You're not going anywhere. We're getting you to a doctor." But the local clinic found nothing wrong with her, despite her skin feeling like ice to the touch. Her temperature read normal on their thermometers. "Probably just summer flu," the doctor said, but I could tell he was puzzled. On our way home, I got a call from Dr. Winters. "My instruments caught something last night," she said, excitement in her voice. "A full spectral image near Devil's Pond. You won't believe this, but it looks like a woman in colonial-era clothing." "I'm taking Ellie to stay with friends in Boston," I said. "Call me when you have something real. Jack, there's more. The cold spots are concentrating all around your cabin." I looked at Ellie in the passenger seat, her face turned to the window, her breath fogging the glass. "I'm coming to the station. I need to see what you found." After dropping Ellie at home with strict instructions to lock the doors and call me if anything strange happened, I met Dr. Winters at the ranger station. Her laptop showed a blurry image captured by her thermal cameras. A woman-shaped figure, glowing blue-white against the forest background. The temperature around this figure was minus 80 degrees, Dr. Winters said. Nothing living could survive that. "So what is it?" "I don't know, but there's something else." She pointed to another screen showing a solar chart. "There's an unusual solar storm happening right now. The pattern matches exactly with the historical records of when these freezing deaths occur." Before I could process this, my phone rang. It was Howard Fletcher. "I need to see you immediately," he said, his voice shaking. "I've found the mining shaft where they imprisoned my great-grandmother. There are markings on the walls, ritual symbols. And Ranger Calhoun, they match the frost patterns exactly." I met Fletcher at the old mining shaft half an hour later. The entrance was overgrown, nearly hidden by brush and small trees. Inside, the temperature dropped at least 20 degrees. Fletcher shone his flashlight on the stone walls. Carved into the rock were the same delicate fern patterns we'd seen on the frozen bodies. My great-grandmother wasn't the witch they thought. "She was," Fletcher explained, his breath visible in the cold air. "She was trying to stop something that was already here when the colonists arrived." "What are you saying?" "The entity they called the Ice Woman needs a human host, a vessel. Every 100 years it tries to fully manifest by taking over a young woman with the right connections." "What connections?" Fletcher looked at me sadly. "Bloodline, Ranger. Calhoun, it needs someone connected to my great-grandmother's bloodline." My phone rang, making us both jump. It was Ellie. "Dad, Her voice was faint, scared. "Dad, she's here, in the house. Ellie? Ellie!" The line went dead. I raced back to my cabin, Fletcher struggling to keep up behind me. When I burst through the front door, the inside of my cabin was covered in frost. Icicles hung from the ceiling in the middle of July, and there in my living room stood a woman. Her skin was translucent blue-white, her hair moving slowly as if underwater. Her eyes were hollow except for pinpricks of light deep inside them. The ice woman. She turned to look at me, and I felt the cold radiating from her, a bone-deep cold that stole my breath away. Behind her on the couch lay Ellie, her skin turning blue, frost patterns already forming on her cheeks. "Get away from my daughter!" I shouted, lunging forward, but my hand passed right through the ice woman's form. The cold burned my skin, leaving frost patterns where I'd touched. Fletcher appeared behind me holding an old book. "You can't fight her like that," he gasped. "She's not fully physical yet. That's why she needs your daughter." The ice woman drifted closer to Ellie, one pale hand reaching for my daughter's face. "What do?" I begged Fletcher. "Get Ellie out of here. Take her to the hospital. I'll meet you there with what we need." I scooped Ellie into my arms, her body terrifyingly cold, and ran for my truck. The ice woman didn't follow. She couldn't leave the cold zone she'd created in my cabin. But as I drove away, I saw her watching from the window, her hollow eyes following us. And somehow, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The hospital emergency room buzzed with activity when I burst through the doors with Ellie in my arms. "Please, she's freezing to death," I gasped to the startled nurse at the front desk. They rushed Ellie to a treatment room. Doctors swarmed around her, baffled by her icy skin despite the room's warmth. Machines beeped as they wrapped her in heated blankets. "Her core temperature is 85 degrees, one doctor said. "She should be unconscious, maybe even dead." "I don't understand how she's still awake." Ellie's eyes fluttered open, finding mine. "Dad," she whispered, "she's coming." As if on cue, the lights flickered. The heating vents blew cold air instead of warm. Frost began forming on the windows. From the inside. "What's happening?" a nurse asked, her breath suddenly visible in the room. One of the monitors sparked and died. Then another. Medical equipment began failing throughout the ER. "Power surge," someone yelled, but I knew better. She had followed us. The emergency room doors slid open. Howard Fletcher hobbled in, clutching his leather bag and the old book. Behind him came Dr. Winters, carrying her monitoring equipment. "We don't have much time," Fletcher said, joining me by Ellie's bedside. He opened the ancient book to a marked page and showed me faded drawings that matched the frost patterns exactly. "This entity has existed in these mountains since before European settlement," he explained, his voice low and urgent. "The local tribes had rituals to keep it contained. When the colonists came, they didn't understand. They thought my great-grandmother was controlling it, when she was actually fighting it." "What does it want with Ellie?" I demanded. "It needs a young female host with a connection to the original bloodline." Fletcher looked at me grimly. "Your wife, what was her maiden name?" My heart sank. "Fletcher. Sarah Fletcher." He nodded sadly. "I suspected as much. We're distant cousins. The bloodline continues through your daughter." Outside the treatment room, doctors and nurses were racing around as more equipment failed. The temperature in the hospital was dropping rapidly. Dr. Winters hooked up her instruments to a battery pack. "The energy signature is off the charts," she said. "It's the same pattern we recorded at Devil's Pond, but much stronger." "How do we stop it?" I asked, watching ice crystals form on the walls around us. Fletcher turned the brittle pages of his book. "The entity can be trapped in a willing host. It doesn't have to be Ellie." "What are you saying?" "Someone else from the bloodline could offer themselves instead." I thought of Sarah, of how she looked so much like Ellie, of how I'd failed to save her when she died giving birth. "I'm not from the bloodline," I said slowly. Fletcher's eyes widened. No, but your daughter is. And so her father... I'm connected by blood to Ellie, I finished. Would that work? In theory, Fletcher nodded. But Jack, you'd be trapping the entity inside yourself. It would be a living death. On the bed, Ellie shivered violently. The frost patterns on her skin were spreading, growing more intricate. Dr. Winters looked up from her equipment. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast. The cold is concentrating around Ellie. The lights went out completely, emergency generators failing. In the darkness, I saw her, the ice woman, drifting down the hospital corridor toward us. Nurses screamed as she passed, their skin frosting over at her touch. How do I do it? I asked Fletcher. How do I get it to take me instead? He pulled out a small leather pouch. These herbs were used in the original ritual, and we need something reflective, a mirror. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Sarah's silver compact. Will this work? Fletcher nodded. Perfect. As the ice woman floated closer, Fletcher mixed the herbs with water and drew symbols on my forehead and hands. He began chanting words, in the language I didn't recognize, while Dr. Winters held her equipment up, recording everything. Now, open the mirror and face it toward her, Fletcher instructed. I stood between the entity and my daughter, holding the compact mirror out. The ice woman paused, her hollow eyes fixed on her reflection. Tell her you offer yourself in place of your daughter, Fletcher whispered. I offer myself, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Take me instead of my daughter. The ice woman drifted closer. The cold was unbearable, burning my skin. Frost formed on my eyelashes, my lips, my fingertips. Not enough, Fletcher muttered. The connection isn't strong enough. Desperate, I pulled the compact mirror open wider. Sarah, I whispered to the mirror, help me save our daughter. Something changed. The mirror's surface rippled like water. For just a moment, I saw Sarah's face reflected back at me instead of my own. The ice woman screamed, a sound like wind through frozen trees. She lunged forward, not toward Ellie, but toward me. I felt her enter my body like plunging into a frozen lake. Every cell seemed to crystallize. My blood turned to slush in my veins. Dad, Ellie cried out, struggling to rise from the bed. Stay back, Fletcher warned, holding her down. I could feel the ice woman inside me now, fighting for control. My skin began to turn blue-white. The same frost patterns spread across my arms, my chest. What do I do now? I gasped, each breath painful as ice formed in my lungs. The pond, Fletcher said urgently. You need to get to Devil's Pond, where she was created. It's the only place she can be contained. Dr. Winters grabbed my arm. I'll drive you. We don't have much time. The drive to Devil's Pond was a blur of pain and cold. The entity inside me fought viciously, trying to break free. Ice formed on the car windows from the inside. The steering wheel frosted over in Dr. Winters' hands. Almost there, she said through chattering teeth. Hold on, Jack. When we reached the pond, I could barely walk. My joints were freezing solid. Dr. Winters helped me to the water's edge. Fletcher says you need to submerge completely, she said. The pond will freeze over with you and the entity inside. I looked at the dark water. Once I went under, I would never come back up. Tell Ellie I love her, I managed to say. Tell her I'm sorry I wasn't a better father. Dr. Winters squeezed my frozen hand. You're saving her life, Jack. You're the best father she could have. With the last of my strength, I staggered into the pond. The water didn't even feel cold compared to the ice inside me. As I waded deeper, I pulled out Sarah's compact one last time. In its reflection, I thought I saw her smiling at me, beckoning me forward. I'm coming, Sarah, I whispered. The entity realized what was happening too late. It tried to escape, to pull itself out of my body, but the ritual had bound us together. As the water reached my chest, my neck, finally my head, I felt the ice woman's silent scream inside my mind. Then everything went quiet and still as the pond's surface froze solid above me. For 3 days, they tried to break the ice at Devil's Pond. Chainsaws, pickaxes, even blowtorches. Nothing worked. The ice would simply refreeze as soon as they made progress. Ellie watched from the shore, wrapped in blankets despite the summer heat. The frost patterns had faded from her skin, but she still felt cold inside. "He's really gone, isn't he?" She asked Dr. Winters, who hadn't left her side since that night at the hospital. "Your father saved you," Dr. Winters said gently. "He saved everyone." Howard Fletcher had spent those 3 days combing through his records, looking for any way to bring Jack back. But on the morning of the 4th day, they found him slumped over his research, dead from what looked like a heart attack. The medical examiner noted strange frost patterns on his heart, though his body was otherwise warm. By the end of the week, government officials arrived. Men and women in dark suits who took Dr. Winter's equipment and research. They interviewed everyone involved, then declared the whole area off limits due to environmental contamination. "They don't want people to know what really happened," Dr. Winters told Ellie as they packed up Jack's cabin. "It doesn't fit into their view of the world." "What will happen to my dad?" Ellie asked, holding Sarah's compact mirror that they'd found on the shore of the pond. "I don't know," Dr. Winters admitted, "but I don't think he's suffering. I think maybe he's with your mom now." Ellie went to live with her aunt in Boston. Life slowly returned to what others might call normal. School, friends, college applications. But she never felt warm again, not really. And in her dreams, she still saw the pond, still heard the whisper of her father's voice through the ice. 5 years passed. Dr. Winters's research was classified by the government. The rangers put up fences around Devil's Pond, posting signs about unsafe ice conditions, even though the pond remained frozen solid year-round through summer heat and winter storms alike. On her 20th birthday, Ellie drove back to White Mountain National Forest. She parked where the trail began and hiked the familiar path to Devil's Pond. The forest was quiet, the summer air thick with humidity, but as she got closer to the pond, the temperature dropped. Her breath came out in visible puffs. The ice looked exactly the same as it had 5 years ago, smooth and unnaturally clear. Ellie knelt at the edge and placed her hand on the surface. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. Something shifted beneath the ice. Not a physical movement, but a change. In the light, a ripple of awareness. Ellie pulled up her sleeve. Small frost patterns had begun appearing on her skin over the past few months. Delicate ferns that came and went without warning. The doctors in Boston had no explanation. She opened her mother's compact mirror and gazed at her reflection. For a moment, she thought she saw someone else looking back. A face, half her father's, half something older, something patient and cold. "I won't forget," she promised, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'll come back every year." As she stood to leave, she noticed something new at the center of the pond. A face forming in the ice, looking up from below. Her father's face, peaceful now, eyes closed as if sleeping. Ellie touched the frost patterns on her arm, wondering what they meant, wondering if the ice woman had truly been contained, or if some small part had escaped with her that night. On her drive back to Boston, the car's heater on full blast. Despite the summer heat, Ellie caught a glimpse of herself in the rearview mirror. For just a second, her eyes held pinpricks of light deep within them, and somewhere far behind her, in the deepest part of the forest, a woman's voice began to sing a soft, sad lullaby, calling her home. 10 years later, Ellie returned once more to Devil's Pond. This time, she wasn't alone. Her 4-year-old daughter, Sarah, held tightly to her hand as they walked the forest path. "Is this where Grandpa lives?" the little girl asked, her breath visible in the sudden cold. "In a way," Ellie answered, leading her to the pond's edge. The ice was still there, still perfect and clear, but now Ellie could see her father's face clearly beneath the surface, and he seemed to be smiling. "Hello, Dad," Ellie said softly. "I brought someone to meet you." Little Sarah pressed her small hand to the ice. "Hi, Grandpa," she whispered. Beneath their feet, something stirred, not just under the ice, but in the earth itself, in the air, around them. A presence awakening after years of silence. As they walked back through the forest, hand in hand, frost patterns bloomed briefly on the trees they passed. A cold wind followed them, carrying what might have been words or just the memory of words. The bloodline continues. She will return, but Ellie, stronger now and no longer afraid, simply held her daughter closer and whispered back to the forest, "Not this time, not ever again." Behind them, the pond remained frozen, a silent guardian holding its prisoner fast. But whether that prisoner was Jack Calhoun or something much older, much colder, only the forest knew for sure, and the forest keeps its secrets well. I still remember the smell. That's what gets me most when I think back. The thick, rotting, sweet odor of the swamp in August. The kind that sticks to your clothes, your skin, your hair. The kind you can't wash off no matter how hard you scrub. My name is Michelle Kowalski, and before last summer, I was just another park ranger trying to find some peace in the quiet corners of the Ocala National Forest. Maybe I was running from something too. Most of us who choose to live out here are. For me, it was Jimmy's face. My little brother, all of 19 years old when they shipped him back from Vietnam in a box. I couldn't look at another gun after. In that, couldn't stand the sound of helicopters, so I traded the city for cypress trees and the constant hum of cicadas. That summer was the hottest on record, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer like the world itself is melting. Sweat would soak through my uniform before I'd even finished my morning coffee. The animals felt it too. Gators stayed underwater longer, birds went quiet in the middle of the day, and the mosquitoes, God, the mosquitoes were relentless. But something else was wrong that August. The locals noticed it first. Old-timers like Martha Yazzie started hanging strange bundles of herbs on their doors. When I asked her why, she just pointed to the sky and said, "Triple moon coming. Bad things follow." I didn't understand then. I was too busy being practical, checking water quality reports and monitoring the unusual number of dead fish washing up along the shore. Too busy ignoring the dreams that had started, dreams of eyes watching me from the water, of something large moving through the trees at night. The drownings started in July. First a camper, then a fisherman. Both found floating face up with their eyes wide open, expressions frozen in terror. The medical examiner called it accidental, but I'd seen enough drowning victims to know something wasn't right. People who drown struggle. These bodies looked like they'd seen something so horrifying they'd forgotten to even fight. I didn't know then that I was already part of it. That when I ran my fingers across the strange, fuzzy growth on the cypress knees near where the second body was found, the spores were already finding their way into my lungs. I didn't know that the silence that fell across the water at midday wasn't just the heat. I was still wearing Jimmy's peace pendant, still thinking the worst things in this world were the ones humans did to each other. Still believing the monsters were all men. I was wrong. That first day, when I found the handprint pressed into the mud by the water's edge, a print twice the size of my own hand with elongated fingers, was when everything changed. I knelt down and placed my palm next to it, feeling suddenly small and very, very vulnerable. The swamp went quiet. Not a bird call, not a splash, not even the buzz of insects. Just silence and the feeling of being watched. Something was out there in my swamp, something that was watching us, hunting us, and I was about to come face to face with it. I called in the handprint, of course. My boss, Ranger Stevens, came out to see it himself. By then, the mud was starting to dry out in the heat. The clear edges of the print were getting fuzzy. Probably just some kids playing a prank, Stephen said, not even bending down for a closer look. Or a bear print that got distorted in the mud. I knew better. Bears don't have fingers, and those fingers had pressed deep into the mud. Whatever made this was heavy, really heavy. As Stevens walked back to his truck, a man approached from the tree line, tall, with skin tanned like old leather and eyes that had seen too much. He wore faded jeans and a sweat-stained t-shirt, with a hunting knife strapped to. His belt. "You found another one, didn't you?" he asked, his voice rough. "Sir, this is an active investigation area. Name's Frank Delgado," he said, ignoring my warning. "My brother Marcus went missing in these swamps 3 months ago. No one's looking for him anymore." I remembered the case. Marcus Delgado experienced. Hunter vanished without a trace. Search parties found nothing. "I'm sorry about your brother, Mr. Delgado, but you shouldn't be here." Frank pointed at the handprint. "Did anyone tell you what the locals call it? The skunk ape, like Bigfoot, but meaner. Smells worse too." I'd heard the stories, of course. Every forest has its monster tales. But Frank wasn't talking like a man sharing campfire stories. His hands were shaking. "It took my brother," he said, "and now it's taking more. I should have sent him away." Instead, I asked, "What makes you so sure?" He pulled out a small notebook from his back pocket. Marcus was tracking it, studying it. He was obsessed. He handed me the notebook, open to a page with a crude drawing. A tall, hairy figure with impossibly long arms. "Your brother was looking for Bigfoot?" Frank's face hardened. "No, it was looking for him." Before I could ask more questions, Stevens honked his horn, signaling it was time to go. I handed the notebook back. "If you want to talk more, I'm usually at the East Station," I said. As I walked away, Frank called after me. "Check the water, near where you found the body. Look for the fungus." Back at the station, I couldn't stop thinking about Frank's words. After filing my report, which Stevens would probably bury, I grabbed some sample vials and headed back out. The sun was getting low when I reached the drowning site again. No sign of Frank. The handprint was almost gone now, baked dry by the afternoon heat. I knelt by the water's edge, and that's when I saw it. A strange, reddish growth, spreading across the base of the cypress trees that dipped into the water. It wasn't algae. The texture was all wrong, fuzzy, almost like mold, but with tiny thread-like structures reaching up toward the air. I took samples, careful not to touch it directly. Something about it made the hairs on my arms stand up. As I worked, the normal swamp sounds, frogs, insects, birds, went silent. 1 minute a noisy chorus, the next, nothing. Complete silence. That's when I felt it, the sensation of being watched. I looked up slowly. Across the narrow channel of water, about 15 feet away, the cypress trees grew thick and tangled. Shadows gathered between them as the sun sank lower, and in those shadows, 2 eyes, amber-colored, reflecting the last light like a cat's. But they were at least 7 feet off the ground, way too high for any normal animal. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stood very slowly, backing away from the water. The eyes didn't move, just watched. A twig snapped under my boot, and the eyes disappeared. Whatever it was moved away with barely a sound. Impressive for something so large. I hurried back to my truck, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been sized up, measured, hunted. That night, I looked at the samples under the small microscope we kept at the station. The fungus wasn't like anything I'd seen before. The spores had a strange star-shaped pattern. I was still examining them when my phone rang. Ranger Kowalski. A woman's crisp voice. "This is Dr. Amelia Westbrook from the CDC. I'm calling about the drowning victims in your area. I'll be arriving tomorrow morning. We need to talk." I hung up feeling uneasy. The CDC doesn't show up for normal drownings. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Through my open window, I could hear the swamp. alive again with its night chorus. But underneath the familiar sounds was something new, something that sounded almost like footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving through the water. And beneath it all, just at the edge of hearing, what sounded like breathing, deep, raspy breathing, too big to be human. I met Dr. Westbrook at the station early the next morning. She wasn't what I expected, young, maybe mid-30s, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore practical clothes, khaki pants, hiking boots, and a light blue button-up shirt with the CDC logo. "The drowning victims," she said, skipping the small talk. "They all had a strange fungal growth in their lungs and brain tissue. We've never seen anything like it before." "Like this?" I showed her the samples I'd collected. She examined them closely, her face going pale. "Yes, exactly like this. Where did you find it?" "Near where the last victim was found. It's growing on trees at the waterline." She looked up at me. "This isn't normal fungal behavior, and it doesn't explain the fear response we found in the victims." Their brains showed extreme terror at time of death. Before we could talk more, the radio crackled to life. A teenager had been found wandering along the highway, muddy, confused, and babbling nonsense. They were bringing him to the station. His name was Lucas Patterson, 17 years old. He'd been camping with friends who were now missing. When they brought him in, my stomach twisted. His eyes were glassy, skin flushed with fever. Mud caked his clothes and hair, and he smelled of swamp water and something else, a musky, rotten odor that made my nose wrinkle. "It gets in your head," he kept saying. "It gets in your head. It wants to show us." Dr. Westbrook checked his vitals. "He's burning up, pupils dilated, breathing too fast." She took blood samples and swabbed the inside of his mouth. "Lucas," I said gently, kneeling in front of him, "what happened to your friends?" His eyes focused on me for a moment. "We heard it moving around our camp. Michael went to look, then Tommy. They didn't come back. It called to me too, but I ran." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I saw it. Standing by the water, so tall, smelled like death." "What did it look like?" I asked. "Red eyes, fur, long arms." He grabbed my wrist suddenly, his grip surprisingly strong. It showed me things in my head, pictures, the swamp dying, people cutting down trees, poison in the water. His eyes rolled back. "We did this. We made it angry." Lucas started seizing then. Dr. Westbrook called for an ambulance, but I couldn't shake his words, or the image he'd described. So similar to the drawing in Frank's brother's notebook. Frank showed up at the station later that morning, as if he'd sensed something was happening. When I told him about Lucas, he nodded grimly. "Kid's lucky to be alive. Thing usually doesn't let people go once it gets them." "We need to find his friends," I said. Frank shook his head. "Too late for them, but I know someone who might help us understand what we're dealing with." As we prepared to head out, Deputy Roy Tanner walked in. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a permanent scowl. "What's Delgado doing here?" he demanded. "Still peddling your crazy monster stories, Frank?" Frank ignored him. Tanner turned to me. "Kowalski, Stevens told me to tell you to drop this. The kid's got heat stroke, that's all. No need to stir up panic. 3 people are dead, Deputy, and 2 more missing. People drown in swamps. City folks come out here not knowing the dangers." He eyed Dr. Westbrook with suspicion. "We don't need outsiders making things worse." After he left, Dr. Westbrook looked at me. "He seems nervous." "Everyone's nervous," Frank muttered. "They should be." We headed deep into the swamp, Frank leading the way in his small boat. The day was hotter than ever, sweat soaking through my shirt within minutes. Dr. Westbrook took samples of the red fungus whenever we spotted it. I noticed it was growing more heavily the deeper we went. Around midday, Frank cut the engine and pointed to a cluster of trees ahead. Something dark, stained. "The bark, what is that?" Westbrook asked. Frank guided the boat closer. My stomach turned. Animal entrails had been arranged in strange patterns on the trees, symbols I didn't recognize. It marks its territory, Frank said quietly. My brother found similar markings before he disappeared. A few hundred yards further, we found an abandoned structure, an old research station that had been set up in the 1940s and later abandoned. The metal walls were rusted, the door hanging off its hinges. Inside, we found a journal covered in dust. The last entry was dated 1947. The handwriting was shaky. It's watching us, standing at the edge of the clearing every night. The men think I'm crazy, but I've seen it. 8 feet tall at least. Walks like a man but isn't one. Red eyes. The locals fear it. They call it the Guardian of the Swamp. This will be my last entry. The others are gone. I'm alone now. It's coming closer every night. Thunder rumbled overhead. A storm was moving in fast. Too fast to make it back before dark. We should stay. Here tonight, Frank said. Not safe to be on the water. As the sky darkened and rain began to pound the metal roof, Frank told us more about his brother. Marcus wasn't just hunting it. He wanted to communicate with it. He believed it was intelligent, some kind of ancient spirit or guardian. That's ridiculous, Dr. Westbrook said. Frank's face hardened. Is it? That thing out there isn't natural. Normal animals don't make people go crazy with fear. Normal animals don't leave symbols. The storm raged all night. None of us slept much. Every crash of thunder made us jump. But it wasn't just the storm keeping us awake. Something was moving outside, splashing through the water, circling the building. Heavy footsteps breathing, and somewhere in the darkness, a low, rumbling growl that wasn't thunder. By morning, the storm had passed, but the feeling of being watched hadn't. As we prepared to leave, Dr. Westbrook pointed to the ground outside. Look, footprints in the mud, huge, human-like, but with long, curved toes. They circled the entire building, as if something had been pacing around us all night long. We followed the footprints as far as we could. They led deeper into the swamp, to places where the trees grew so thick they blocked out the sun. Frank moved ahead confidently, but I could tell even he was nervous. He kept one hand on his hunting knife, eyes scanning the water for any movement. There's a place up ahead, he said quietly. Martha Yazzie told me about it once, an old site from her people. She said the creature has been here longer than any of us. After an hour of slow going through the thick mud and tangled roots, we reached a small island rising from the swamp. At its center stood a formation of moss-covered stones arranged in a circle. Behind them was a shallow cave cut into the rocky hillside. I've been a ranger here for 2 years, I said. I've never heard of this place. The locals keep it secret, Frank replied. For good reason. Inside the cave, the walls were covered with paintings. Faded red and orange figures showed people hunting, fishing. But at the far end was something different. A tall figure with a head like an animal and long, reaching arms. Below it were smaller human figures lying on their backs. What is this place? Dr. Westbrook asked, her voice hushed. A warning, came a voice from behind us. We spun around. An elderly woman stood at the cave entrance, leaning on a wooden walking stick. Her face was deeply lined, her silver hair pulled, back in a tight bun. Martha Yazzie, you shouldn't be here, she said. None of you. Martha, Frank nodded respectfully. We need your help. She studied each of us, her dark eyes lingering on me. You've seen it, haven't you, girl? The Guardian? I thought of those amber eyes watching me from the shadows. Maybe, I'm not sure. You've been marked, she said simply. It knows your scent now. Dr. Westbrook stepped forward. Mrs. Yazzie, people are dying. We need to understand what we're dealing with. Martha's expression didn't change. The Swamp Guardian has been here since the beginning. It protects the land from those who would harm it. But something has changed. The Guardian is angry now. Because of pollution, I asked, remembering Lucas's fevered words. She nodded. The poison in the water has twisted it. And now the triple. Moon comes. 3 full moons in 1 month, the time when the veil is thin and the guardian walks freely to claim its sacrifices. Sacrifices? Dr. Westbrook's voice was skeptical. In the old days, offerings were made, food, animals. The guardian took what it needed and left the people in peace. Now it takes what it wants. A shout from outside interrupted us. We rushed from the cave to find Deputy Tanner arriving in a patrol boat, his face twisted with anger. "What the hell are you people doing out here? This area is now restricted by order of the sheriff." "Since when?" I demanded. "Since we found 2 more bodies this morning, friends of that Patterson kid." Both drowned. His eyes darted nervously to the trees. "Everyone needs to clear out. Now!" Before anyone could argue, a scream came from back inside the cave. We rushed in to find Dr. Westbrook backing away from Lucas Patterson, who somehow had followed us here. His eyes were wild, his movements jerky. "It's calling me," he said, his voice different now, deeper somehow. "It wants to show us something." "Beautiful." Lucas moved with sudden, unnatural speed. He grabbed Dr. Westbrook's arm, his strength shocking as he pulled her toward the cave entrance. Tanner and I rushed forward, struggling to restrain him. It took all 3 of us to hold him down. His skin burned hot under my hands. "He shouldn't be able to move," Dr. Westbrook gasped, examining the scratches his nails had left on her arm. "The sedatives in the hospital should have kept him unconscious for days." Martha stood watching, her face grim. "The fever takes them, changes them, makes them its eyes and ears." While we secured Lucas with rope from Tanner's boat, Dr. Westbrook pulled me aside. "I got the lab results back on his blood work this morning," she whispered. "There's something in his system, spores similar to what we found in the water, but they've changed. They're attacking his brain tissue, reconfiguring it somehow." "Is it spreading?" I asked. She nodded, rolling up her sleeve to show me a small rash forming where Lucas had scratched her. "I think it is. A noise from the water made us all freeze. A splash too large for a fish. Then another. Something was moving around the island, circling it. "We need to go," Tanner said, his hand moving to his gun. "Now." As we loaded Lucas into Tanner's boat and prepared to leave, I noticed Frank hanging back, talking quietly with Martha. She pressed something into his hand, small bundles of dried herbs tied with string. "What's that?" I asked as he rejoined us. "Protection," he said simply. On the way back, Tanner revealed something disturbing. The Park Service had found strange equipment in the swamp, heat sensors and cameras set up by someone to track wildlife movements. The last images showed a massive heat signature moving through the trees at night, too large to be any known. "Animal in the swamp. Who set up the equipment?" I asked. Tanner looked grim. "Your boss, Stevens. He's been monitoring something out here for months, keeping it quiet. As night fell, we reached the ranger station to find it empty. Stevens was gone, no sign of where he'd gone." While Tanner secured Lucas, Frank pulled me aside. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly. "My family. We've been hunting this thing for generations. My grandfather, my father, now me. Why? Because it has to be stopped. Every 33 years, the killings get worse. The triple moon makes it stronger." Before I could ask more, the lights went out. All of them, at once. Through the windows, we could see the whole area had gone dark. Then the noises started, splashing from the water behind the station, hissing from the tall grass, the skittering of claws on the wooden deck outside. "It's not coming alone," Frank whispered, loading his shotgun. "It never does." That night was the longest of my life. They came at us from all sides, not the creature itself, but its servants. Snakes slithered under the door gaps. Spiders dropped from the ceiling. Outside we could hear alligators moving across the ground, not back to the water, but toward the station, working together in a way they never should. "This isn't natural," Tanner kept saying, his face pale as he fired shots at a water moccasin that lunged for his leg. Frank handed out Martha's herb bundles. "Put these around your neck," he ordered. The strong, sharp smell made my eyes water, but the snakes seemed to avoid me after that. By morning, we were exhausted, but alive. The animals had retreated with the darkness, but our situation had gotten worse. Dr. Westbrook was showing symptoms: fever, confusion, her eyes glassy just like Lucas's. The scratch on her arm had spread, red lines creeping up toward her shoulder. "It's in the water," she said, her voice weak. "The spores. They're not just on the trees, they're in the water system." That explained how it was spreading so fast. Not just the drowning victims, but anyone who came in contact with the swamp water. "We need to call for help," I insisted. "Evacuate the area." Tanner shook his head. "Already tried. Phone lines are down, radio too, we're on our own." While checking the perimeter, I found Tanner's partner, or what was left of him. His body was arranged in a sitting position against a tree, eyes open, mouth frozen in a scream. Around him, small objects had been placed in a pattern. His badge, his watch, coins from his pocket. "It's studying us," Frank said when I showed him, "learning about us." Back inside, Dr. Westbrook's condition was worsening. Her fever had spiked, and she kept talking about beautiful patterns she could see in the air. Lucas was worse, now fully delirious, muttering in what sounded like another language. "We need to end this," Frank said, opening his bag to reveal several bullets with silver tips. "My family's been making these for generations. It's the only thing that hurts it." "Silver bullets?" Tanner laughed harshly. "Like a werewolf." "Call it what you want," Frank replied, "but silver burns it, so do these." He held up the herbs. "Martha's people have known how to fight it for centuries." I remembered the cave paintings, the tall figure with the animal head. How old were those drawings? Hundreds of years? Thousands? "We need to trap it," I said. "Those paintings showed a ritual, a circle of stones. Maybe there's a way to contain it." Frank nodded slowly. "Martha said something similar, a binding ritual that could trap it, maybe even heal what's been corrupted." As we planned, Dr. Westbrook suddenly sat up, her eyes wide and unnaturally bright. "It wants to help us," she said, her voice not quite her own. "The Guardian. It just wants to show us something beautiful. Why are you fighting it?" She lunged for the door, moving with that same unnatural speed Lucas had shown. Frank caught her, struggling to hold her back. "It's getting stronger. The infection is spreading faster. We had to tie her to a chair." It broke my heart to see her like that, a brilliant scientist reduced to a raving puppet. But we had no choice. As twilight approached, we prepared to leave. The plan was simple but dangerous. Return to the stone circle, prepare the binding ritual using Martha's instructions, and lure the creature in. Frank would use the silver bullets if necessary. I still refused to carry a gun. Jimmy's face still haunted me when I thought about it. But I carried a silver knife Frank had given me and pouches of herbs. Just as we were leaving, Dr. Westbrook called out to me. For a moment her eyes cleared, the real Amelia breaking through. "Michelle," she whispered urgently, "if we fail, you have to warn people. The spores, they're changing, evolving. If they reach the city water supply..." Her voice trailed off, her eyes glazing over again. The thing inside her was taking control again. We left Lucas and Dr. Westbrook secured at the station and took Frank's boat back to the stone circle. The swamp was eerily quiet. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed to have died. The water was still as glass, reflecting the rising full moon, the second full moon this month. Tomorrow would bring the third, the final night of the triple moon cycle. Halfway there, something large moved under our boat, rocking it violently. Frank nearly lost his balance, grabbing the side just in time. "It knows we're coming," he said. We reached the island as night fell completely. Working quickly, we arranged the stones Martha had described, spreading herbs in a circle. Frank marked symbols in the dirt with a mixture of ash and his own blood. An old family tradition, he said. That's when we heard Tanner's scream. He'd been keeping watch at the water's edge. By the time we reached him, he was gone. Just ripples on the water's surface and his gun lying on the ground. "It took him," Frank whispered. We waited, tense, for what felt like hours. Nothing happened, no sounds, no movement, just the oppressive silence of the swamp. Then Frank suddenly stiffened. His eyes went wide, fixed on something over my shoulder. I turned slowly. There it stood at the edge of the trees, at least 8 feet tall, its body covered in matted reddish-brown fur. Its arms hung down past its knees, ending in hands with long curved fingers. But its face, God, its face was what would haunt me forever. Not quite human, not quite animal, with a broad, flat nose and amber eyes that glowed in the darkness. The smell hit me then, overpowering, musky, like rotting vegetation and something else. Something animal, but wrong. Frank raised his gun shakily. "Don't look in its eyes," he warned, but it was too late. I'd already looked. Those eyes locked onto mine, and suddenly I couldn't move. Couldn't think. My mind filled with images, trees being cut down, water turning black with chemicals, animals dying, pain, so much pain. I was dimly aware of Frank shouting my name, of the creature making a low, rumbling sound deep in its chest. Not quite a growl, almost like speech. Then Frank was moving toward it, his gun forgotten at his side. His eyes had the same glazed look as Dr. Westbrook's. The creature had him. "It's beautiful," Frank murmured. "I understand now. I need to go." With it, I tried to call out to stop him, but my voice wouldn't work. I could only watch as Frank walked slowly into the dark water, following the creature as it backed away, those glowing eyes never leaving him. They disappeared beneath the surface. Ripples spread, then nothing. Frank was gone. I don't know how long. I stood there frozen, staring at the spot where Frank had disappeared. Minutes, maybe hours. The spell broke only when I heard a splash nearby, a reminder that I was alone in the creature's territory. Without Frank, without Tanner, I had no boat, no gun, and no idea what to do next. But I couldn't leave Frank. Whatever controlling power the creature had over him, I couldn't believe Frank had gone willingly. His family had hunted this thing for generations. I looked down at the herbs Martha had given us, still clutched in my hand. Frank had taught me just enough tracking skills over the past few days. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. The night was painfully clear, the second full moon lighting the swamp with a silver glow. I followed the water's edge, looking for any sign of disturbance. After nearly an hour, I found what I was looking. 4 drag marks leading from the water onto a muddy bank, and those huge footprints. They led to something I'd never seen before. A hole in the ground, hidden by hanging moss and ferns, about 5 feet across. A cave entrance. The footprints led directly into it. Fear nearly stopped me. Every instinct screamed to run, to get as far away as possible. But I could still see Frank's face, hear Dr. Westbrook's warning about the spores spreading. If I left now, this thing would keep killing, keep spreading its infection. Jimmy's peace pendant felt heavy against my chest. With trembling fingers, I tied Martha's herbs around my neck, gripped the silver knife, and entered the cave. The tunnel sloped downward, the air growing colder and damper. Roots hung from the ceiling, brushing against my face like fingers. The walls glistened with moisture and that strange red fungus. Thicker here, pulsing slightly as if alive. I had no flashlight, but I didn't need one. As I went deeper, the tunnel began to glow with a pale blue light coming from the fungus itself. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. The tunnel opened into a large cavern, and I had to cover my mouth to keep from gasping. The entire space glowed with bioluminescent fungus, blues, greens, and that sickly red covering every surface. Water trickled down the walls, feeding pools that dotted the floor. But what made my blood freeze were the cocoons, human-sized, hanging from the ceiling. At least a dozen of them, made of some fibrous, web-like material. Inside each I could make out a human shape. I moved closer to one, my heart pounding. Through the translucent material I could see a face, the missing fisherman from last month. His eyes were open but unseeing, his skin pale. Thin root-like structures had grown from the cocoon into his skin. He was alive. I could see his chest rising and falling, but whatever was growing on him was changing him. His skin had a strange texture, almost bark-like in places. They are becoming part of it. I spun around, knife raised. Martha Yazzie stood at the edge of the cavern, leaning on her walking stick. "How did you—" "I've always known where it lives," she said simply. "I've been watching you, waiting to see if you were strong enough." "Strong enough for what?" "To do what needs to be done." She gestured at the cocoons. "The Guardian is changing. The poison in the water has corrupted it. Now it's trying to change us too, make us like it." A splash came from a large pool at the center of the cavern. Something was rising from the water. The skunk ape emerged slowly, water streaming from its massive body. In its arms, it carried Frank, limp, unmoving, but still breathing. "Frank!" I called out. The creature turned its amber eyes on me, and immediately my mind flooded with images. Not of destruction this time, but of transformation. Trees growing from human bodies, fungi spreading across cities, humans changing, becoming. Something else, something that could survive what was coming. "It's showing you its plan," Martha said quietly. "It thinks it's saving us." The creature laid Frank gently on the ground and approached me. Its movements were oddly graceful for something so large. It stopped a few feet away, those glowing eyes studying me. Then impossibly words formed in my mind, not spoken aloud, but clear as day. "You understand. You protect the swamp. Join us." "It's in my head," I whispered. Martha nodded. "The spores connect you, make you able to hear it." The creature reached out one long arm toward me, fingers extended. I backed away, raising the knife. "No need for fear, no need for pain. I will show you beauty." Its thoughts washed over me like waves, tempting, soothing. Part of me wanted to give in, to let it show me whatever beauty it promised. Then I saw Jimmy's face in my mind, not scared or hurt, but smiling, reminding me who I was. "No," I said firmly. "This isn't right. You're hurting people." The creature's eyes narrowed. Anger rippled through its thoughts into mine. Humans hurt first. Poison water. Kill trees. Must change or die. "There's another way," I said, remembering Martha's words about the binding ritual. "The old way, before you were corrupted." I began backing toward the stone circle we'd prepared earlier, drawing it away from Frank. Martha moved to Frank's side, pressing something into his hand, a silver stake glinting in the blue light. Frank's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition. The creature roared, a sound so deep it shook dust from the cavern ceiling. It lunged toward Martha, but I threw myself in its path, slashing with the silver knife. The blade cut across its arm, and it howled in pain. Where the silver touched, its fur smoked and burned, revealing pale skin beneath. "Frank now!" I shouted. With strength born of desperation, Frank drove the silver stake into the creature's leg as it passed. It stumbled, crashing into one of the pools. I raced to complete the circle, spreading the last of the herbs in an arc. Martha began chanting, in a language I didn't understand, her voice growing stronger with each word. The creature thrashed in pain, trying to pull the stake from its leg. Its thoughts hammered into my mind. Rage, betrayal, pain. You cannot stop change, cannot stop what comes. Frank staggered to his feet, his face pale but determined. "Finish it, Michelle." I knew what I had to do. The final part of the ritual required blood, my blood, to complete the circle. I dragged the knife across my palm, letting the drops fall onto the herbs. Martha's chanting reached a crescendo. The herbs began to smoke, giving off a sharp, clean smell that cut through the swamp's rot. The creature howled again, lunging toward me with impossible speed. Frank threw himself into its path. They collided with a sickening sound. The creature's long claws sank into Frank's chest, but he didn't let go. Instead, he twisted, driving the creature backward into our circle. "Now!" Frank gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. I closed the circle, dropping the last of my blood onto the herbs. Martha spoke a final word, sharp and clear. The creature screamed, a sound no animal throat should make. Its body convulsed, amber eyes wide with what looked horribly like human understanding. Frank collapsed to the ground. I ran to him, but won. Look told me it was too late. His eyes were already glazing over, but a small smile played on his lips. "Did we get it?" he whispered. "We got it," I assured him, taking his hand. "My brother, tell him I—" But the words died with him. The creature was dying too, its massive body shuddering within our circle. As it fell, something burst from its chest, a cloud of spores, red and glittering in the blue light, filling the air. I couldn't avoid breathing them in. They burned in my lungs, spreading fire through my veins. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was Martha's face, sad but unsurprised, as if she'd known this would happen all along. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later. The white walls and harsh lights hurt my eyes after so long in the swamp's dim green world. A doctor explained that a search party had found me unconscious in the forest. No mention of a cave, of cocoons, of a dying creature. No mention of Frank. When I asked about Dr. Westbrook, the nurses exchanged looks. She had recovered from what they called a severe case of swamp fever, but had been transferred to a CDC facility for further observation. The official story was that an aggressive form of toxic algae had bloomed in the swamp, causing hallucinations and fever in anyone exposed. The drownings were ruled accidental, victims disoriented by the toxin. The area was quarantined, marked, off limits until further notice. I knew better, but who would believe me? I had no proof. The cave entrance had been collapsed when they found me. Frank's body was discovered on the shore, his death attributed to an animal attack. The herbs, the silver knife, all gone. They kept me in the hospital for a week, running tests. My blood work showed strange anomalies they couldn't explain. My temperature ran cooler than normal. My eyes seemed more sensitive to light. When they finally released me, I went straight to Martha's house on the edge of the swamp. It stood empty, dust gathering on the windowsills. The neighbors said she'd left the day after they found me, not telling anyone where she was going. But she'd left. There's something for me, a small wooden box on my doorstep with a note. The guardian is never truly gone. Someone must always watch. Inside the box was a journal filled with handwritten notes about the creature, dating back generations. The last entry was in Martha's handwriting. The cycle is broken, but not ended. The new guardian will rise. The swamp endures. I tried to go back to my normal life, I really did, but something had changed in me. The doctors couldn't see it in their tests, but I could feel it. The spores had done something to my blood, my brain. The first time I noticed was a week after leaving the hospital. I was checking water samples by the east shore when a water moccasin, normally aggressive and territorial, slid right past my boot without striking. It looked at me, tongue flicking, then moved on as if I belonged there. Then there were the dreams, vivid images of the swamp from angles I'd never seen, as if I was seeing through other eyes. I would wake, knowing exactly where a gator had made, a fresh kill where new birds had nested. The greatest change came during the next full moon. I was walking along a trail when my reflection caught in a still pool of water. For just a moment, my eyes glowed amber in the darkness. That same night, I found I couldn't leave the swamp. Not physically couldn't, but something pulled me back, an ache in my chest that grew worse the farther I got from the water. When I returned, the pain eased. The CDC quietly closed their investigation. The quarantine was lifted. tourists and campers returned unaware of what had happened, but I was watching, always watching. Sometimes at night, standing alone on the shore, I feel the swamp speaking to me, not in words, but in feelings, images, showing me where it hurts, where the water is being poisoned, where trees are being cut. I've started leaving small warnings, arrangements of stones, marks on trees, that make people uneasy enough to avoid certain areas. The locals have begun to notice. They leave small offerings, food, flowers, at the edge of the water, an old tradition remembered. Dr. Westbrook sends me letters sometimes. She never mentions what happened, but between the lines, I can tell she remembers. She's studying fungal communications now, looking for ways to neutralize spore infections. Her last letter simply said, "Be careful. They're still watching you. I know who they are. The government, the CDC, whoever covered up what really happened. They test the water regularly. Men in unmarked trucks take samples from the areas where the red fungus grows thickest. Frank's brother turned up last month, asking questions about what happened. I couldn't tell him everything, but I gave him Frank's knife. He seemed to understand more than I said out loud. Today marks 1 year since it happened. The swamp is quiet, healing, but I can feel something growing inside me, changing me little by little. On humid nights when the moon is full, I find myself wading deeper into the water than I should, listening to voices that aren't quite there. Martha was right. The guardian is never truly gone. The cycle continues, and sometimes, when I'm alone, in the deepest part of the swamp, I catch my reflection in the still, dark water. My eyes glow amber in the darkness, and I don't feel afraid. I belong here now, protecting what needs protecting, watching what needs watching. The locals have started to tell stories about me, the ranger who talks to animals, who always knows. When storms are coming, who can find lost children by somehow knowing exactly where to look. They leave their offerings a little closer to my cabin these days. And when the moon is full and the night is still, if they listen carefully, they might hear me walking through the water, guardian of the swamp, neither fully human nor fully other. The first lightning strike missed me by 10 feet. I felt the heat on my face before I heard the thunder, a sound so loud it made my teeth rattle. That's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to hear the thunder after you see the flash. Count the seconds to know how far away the storm is. But not here, not in this part of Shoshone National Forest. My name is Victoria Reynolds, and until 6 months ago, I was a smoke jumper, one of those crazy people who parachute into wildfires. Now I'm just a park ranger with bad dreams and a collection of scars I don't like to talk about. I tucked my weather readings into my pocket as another bolt cracked across the clear blue sky. Clear blue. No clouds anywhere, but lightning was striking again and again at the same spot about half a mile ahead of me. In my 15 years working in national forests, I'd never seen anything like it. My radio crackled. "Reynolds, you seeing this?" It was Martinez from the ranger station. Even through the static, I could hear the worry in his voice. "Yeah," I said, watching another bolt hit the same spot. "Weather Service report anything?" "That's just it. They've got nothing. No storm cells, no electrical activity. According to them, you're standing in sunshine." I looked up at the perfectly blue sky, then at the lightning striking in the distance. "Someone needs to check their equipment, or something's really wrong out there," Martinez said. "The strike zone is near Black Rock Ridge. That's where those campers were found last week." My stomach tightened. 3 college students, all dead from lightning strikes. All in the same spot, all with strange burn patterns on their skin. "I'm heading there now," I said, already walking faster. "Be careful, Reynolds. Something about this doesn't feel right." He had no idea. With each step closer to Black Rock Ridge, the hair on my arms stood up. Static electricity made my skin tingle. A headache began to pulse behind my eyes. The forest, Around me had gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just dead silence broken only by the crack of impossible lightning. As I reached the edge of a clearing, I saw it. A perfect circle of scorched earth about 30 feet across. The ground was black, with small fires still smoldering around the edges. At the center, exactly where each lightning bolt had struck, was something that made me stop cold. 3 massive, 3-toed prints burned into the ground. Each one was bigger than my head. Something moved in the corner of my eye. A shadow passing overhead, too big to be a cloud, too fast to be anything that should exist in these woods. I looked up just in time to see something massive disappear behind the tree line. My radio squealed with feedback, then went dead in my hand. The air suddenly felt heavy, like the moment before a massive storm. But the sky remained stubbornly clear. That's when I noticed the smell, ozone and something else, something ancient, like old stone after rain, but sharper, more alive. I'd come to investigate lightning strikes. Instead, I found the impossible. And somewhere deep in my mind, a memory stirred. Stories the local tribes told about these mountains. Stories about a keeper of storms, a guardian that could call down fire from clear skies. As I stood there, the ground beneath my feet began to vibrate, and a sound like a massive heartbeat echoed through the trees. Whatever was happening in Shoshone National Forest wasn't in any ranger training manual, and I had a terrible feeling it was just beginning. That night at my cabin, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those massive footprints burned into the ground. I kept hearing that strange heartbeat sound echoing through the trees. I got up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The scars on my neck caught the dim light, twisted pink lines that climbed from my collarbone to my jaw. My fingers traced them automatically, the way they always did when I was nervous. 2 years ago, I was leading a team of smoke jumpers into a forest fire in Montana. We'd done dozens of jumps like it before, but that day everything went wrong. A sudden wind shift, a jump line tangled, and then lightning. Out of nowhere, it hit the trees right next to us, sending a burning branch straight through my partner's chest. I tried to save him. That's how I got the scars. But I couldn't reach him in time. Since then, every thunderstorm sends me right back to that moment. My hands shake. I can't breathe. Sometimes I freeze completely. Not the best problem for someone whose job is dealing with wilderness emergencies. I splashed cold water on my face and went to my desk. The scorched carabiner I'd pulled from my partner's jump gear sat next to my computer. I never went anywhere without it. "What did I see today, Mike?" I whispered to the empty room, as if my dead partner could answer. My phone rang, making me jump. "Reynolds," I answered, trying to sound normal. "Victoria, it's Tim Blackfeather." Tim was the Native American liaison for the Forest Service. We'd worked together for years. "Tim, it's midnight. I heard about what you found at Black Rock Ridge." His voice was tight, worried. "The 3-toed prints, the lightning from clear skies. How did you—" "My grandfather used to tell stories about that place," he cut me off. "The elders call it the Storm Keeper's Nest. They've been warning people away from it for generations." My skin prickled. Storm Keeper? A guardian spirit. Takes the form of a massive bird. Controls the lightning. He paused. "My people have agreements with it going back centuries. But something's changed. It shouldn't be active like this." I wanted to laugh, to tell him he was being superstitious. But I'd seen those footprints, that impossible lightning. "What do the stories say about it?" I asked instead. "That it protects the sacred burial grounds on the mountain, that it only appears when the boundary is crossed." He took a deep breath. "Victoria, those campers who died, they were found with burn marks shaped like feathers, weren't they?" My mouth went dry. That detail hadn't been released to the public. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "a wildlife biologist named Gregory Walsh is coming to investigate animal behavior in the area. The Forest Service asked me to guide him. I want you to come with us. Why me? Because you've seen it, he said simply, and because the stories say the Stormkeeper chooses who it reveals itself to. For some reason, it chose you. After we hung, up I sat in the dark for a long time. Outside my window, the stars were bright in a cloudless sky, but far off, over the ridge where I'd been that day, flashes of light pulsed silently, like a lighthouse warning ships away from dangerous shores, or like something sending a signal. I packed my gear for the morning: compass, maps, first aid kit, extra radio batteries. As I worked, the static electricity I'd felt earlier returned, making my hair stand on end. My weather radio sat silent on the table, still showing clear skies for the entire region. But I knew better. Something was brewing over Shoshone National Forest, something the Weather Service couldn't detect, and somehow I was right in the middle of it. The morning brought clear skies again, but the air felt heavy, like before a big storm. I met Tim and Dr. Walsh at the ranger station. Walsh was tall and thin, with glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He looked more like a librarian than someone who tracked wild animals for a living. "Ranger Reynolds," he said, shaking my hand. "I've heard about the strange lightning, but I'm more interested in why every animal in a 5-mile radius is suddenly leaving the area." "Leaving?" I asked. He nodded. "Bears, deer, even birds. It's like they all decided to pack up and move at once. Animals don't do that unless something's very wrong." Tim stayed quiet, but I could tell by his face that this wasn't surprising to him. We hiked to Black Rock Ridge, the place where I'd seen the footprints. With each step closer, my headache returned, and that strange electric feeling crawled over my skin. "You feel that?" I asked the others. Walsh pulled out a small device from his backpack. "Electromagnetic readings are off the charts. This doesn't make sense." When we reached the clearing, I stopped short. The circle of burned earth was still there, but the 3-toed footprints were gone. In their place was a pattern of scorched lines, like a giant had drawn something with fire. Tim knelt by the marks. "It's the old symbol for Guardian," he said, quietly. "From the pictographs in the caves." Walsh was walking the perimeter of the circle, his device beeping faster and faster. "These readings can't be right. The electromagnetic field here is forming a pattern. Fields don't do that naturally." I felt watched. The back of my neck tingled, and not from the static in the air. I turned slowly, scanning the tree line, the sky. That's when I noticed the trees. The old pines at the edge of the clearing had strange markings carved into their trunks. They looked ancient, the bark grown around the cuts. "Tim," I called, "what are these?" He came over, touched the marks gently. His face went pale. "Warnings," he said. "Do not disturb the Keeper of Storms. Do not cross the boundary." Walsh joined us, frowning. "Native American carvings?" "Yes," Tim said. "Very old ones. My grandfather showed me these when I was a boy, told me never to go beyond this point." "Beyond to where?" I asked. Tim pointed up the ridge to where the land rose steeply. "To the nest." Walsh's device suddenly screamed with feedback. At the same moment, my radio burst to life with a sound that made us all jump. That strange heartbeat rhythm I'd heard before, but louder now, more insistent. "What is that?" Walsh asked, his scientist's calm cracking a little. Before we could answer, a shadow passed over us, too big, too fast. We all looked up. Nothing there, just blue sky, but I saw something Tim and Walsh didn't. For just a second, a massive shape reflected in the small pond nearby, wings wider than a small plane, a head with a sharp curved beak, eyes that seemed to glow. Then it was gone. "We need to set up monitoring equipment," Walsh said, already digging in his pack. "Cameras, sensors, the works." Tim shook his head. "That's not a good idea." "Why not?" "Because it doesn't want to be studied," Tim said. "It wants to be respected," Walsh scoffed. "With all due respect to your traditions, Ranger Blackfeather, I'm here to gather scientific data." I stepped between them. We'll compromise. We'll set up equipment at a distance, and we respect the boundary markers." Neither looked happy, but they both nodded. As we worked setting up Walsh's equipment, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. The air became more charged. My fingers tingled when I touched metal. By late afternoon, we had cameras facing the ridge and sensors measuring everything from air temperature to radiation levels. That's when Walsh's laptop showed something strange, a pattern of radiation that didn't match anything natural. "These readings," he muttered, "they're almost like a signature or a fingerprint." Night fell quickly in the mountains. As darkness came, we saw it. Flashes of lightning striking the top of the ridge, perfectly spaced like Morse code. "It's communicating," Tim whispered. Walsh was filming everything, his face lit by the screen of his laptop. The pattern repeats, exactly the same sequence over and over. I watched the lightning, trying to make sense of it. Suddenly I realized what I was seeing. "It's drawing something," I said. "Look at where each bolt hits." We watched as the lightning struck 7 different spots along the ridge. Together, they formed the same pattern we'd found burned into the ground, the Guardian symbol. "This can't be natural," Walsh said, his voice shaking slightly. Tim looked at me. "The Stormkeeper knows we're here," he said, "and it's warning us." The sound came then, not thunder, but something deeper, a rumble that you felt in your chest, more than heard. It rolled over us in waves, making the ground shake. Walsh's equipment went crazy, then died all at once. Every screen went black. Every sensor stopped recording. In the sudden silence, we heard it, the beating sound again, like an enormous heart, but closer now, much closer. Then a cry split the night. Not human, not any animal I'd ever heard. It was like thunder given voice, like the mountains themselves were screaming. The hair on my arms stood straight up. My scars began to burn. "We need to leave," Tim said urgently. "Now." But I couldn't move. Something was holding me there, some connection I didn't understand. In the distance, eyes blinked open, 2 glowing points in the darkness, watching us from the ridge. They were blue at first, then shifted to amber, then a deep, angry red. "What do you see?" Walsh asked, following my gaze. "Don't you see it?" I whispered. "The eyes?" He shook his head. "I don't see anything," but Tim nodded slowly. "I see them too," he said. "The Stormkeeper is watching us." "And it's angry," I added as the eyes burned brighter. The storm was coming, and somehow I knew it was coming for us. We spent a restless night at our camp. None of us slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those glowing eyes watching us from the ridge. The strange heartbeat sound came and went all night, sometimes so faint I thought I was imagining it, sometimes so loud it made our tent shake. Morning brought fog so thick I couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead, but at least the oppressive feeling had lifted a bit. Walsh was already up, trying to fix his equipment. "Nothing works," he said when he saw me. "It's like something fried all the circuits." Tim was making coffee over a small camp stove. He'd been quiet since last night. "Your people," I said, sitting next to him. "They've lived with this thing for generations." He nodded. "The Stormkeeper has always been here, protecting the sacred places. But why is it active now? Why those campers? Why us?" Tim poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to me. "There's been logging activity closer to the ridge than ever before. New roads being cut. You think that's what triggered it? The boundary has been crossed," he said simply. Walsh joined us, his face tired but excited. "Whatever this phenomenon is, it's manipulating electromagnetic fields in ways I can't explain. I need to get a team in here." "No," Tim and I said at the same time. "More people will just make it worse," I added. Walsh opened his mouth to argue, but stopped when we heard the sound of someone coming through the underbrush. I reached for my sidearm. Rangers carry guns for bear encounters, but relaxed when I saw it was a man with a camera. "Hello there," he called, waving. "This is a restricted area," I said, standing. How did you get past the roadblock? He grinned, not at all bothered by my tone. Martin Rowe, photojournalist. I hiked in from the west side. No roadblocks there. Rowe was in his 30s, with an expensive camera hanging around his neck and the confident look of someone used to, going places he wasn't supposed to. You need to leave, I said. Now. Not a chance. I've been tracking stories of the Thunderbird in this region for years. He looked around excitedly. And now there's actual evidence. Lightning from clear skies. Strange burn patterns. People dying. I stepped closer to him. Those were real people, college kids. This isn't some ghost story to chase. Rowe at least had the decency to look embarrassed. I didn't mean any disrespect, but something is happening here that people need to know about. What do you know about the Thunderbird? Tim asked. Rowe turned to him eagerly. Native American legend. Giant bird that creates storms. Protector spirit. Been reported all over the western states. But most consistently here. He patted his camera. I've been trying to get a photo for years. You think a picture is worth dying for? I asked. He smiled. Would be one hell of a shot. Before I could tell him exactly what I thought about that, Walsh's equipment suddenly came back to life. All of it at once. Screens lit up, sensors started. Beeping. That's impossible, Walsh muttered, hurrying over. Everything was fried. Rowe followed, his camera already out. What are you measuring? Everything, Walsh said, distracted by the readings. Electromagnetic fields, radiation, barometric, pressure. He stopped, staring at one screen. This can't be right. What is it? I asked. The magnetic readings. They're forming a pattern again, but different now. He turned the laptop so we could see. On the screen was a map of our location, with colored lines showing magnetic field. Strengths, they twisted and turned, clearly forming some kind of shape. It looks like, Tim began. A bird, Rowe finished, his voice hushed with excitement. It's drawing a bird. He was right. The pattern on the screen clearly showed a massive bird with wings spread. It knows we're watching, I said quietly. It's showing itself to us. Suddenly, all of Walsh's equipment died again. But this time, we heard something else, a high-pitched whine that made my teeth hurt, followed by a snap of electricity. My camera! Rowe shouted. Smoke was rising from his expensive digital camera. When he tried the power button, nothing happened. A heavy silence fell over our camp. Even the normal forest sounds, birds, insects, wind in the trees were gone. The fog seemed to press in closer. We need to go up there, Rowe said suddenly, pointing to the ridge. To where it lives. No, Tim said firmly. That's exactly what we shouldn't do. Don't you want to understand what's happening? Rowe argued. This could be the discovery of the century. A creature that controls electrical fields, that can create storms, that can kill, I cut in. Those campers crossed the boundary. Now, they're dead. Rowe's eyes lit up. So you admit there's something up there? I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what I believed anymore. Walsh was looking at his dead equipment. We need more data, he said finally. I want to set up equipment closer. To the ridge. Tim stood up. I won't help you do that. Fine, Walsh said. I'll go myself. No one's going anywhere alone, I said firmly. Rowe shouldn't even be here. But now that he is, we stick together. That's when we heard it. The sound of massive wings beating the air. It came from above us, from beyond the fog. Something huge was circling. Rowe grabbed his backup camera, a small one from his pocket, and pointed it upward. For a moment, the fog thinned. Through a break in the mist, we all saw it, a massive dark shape moving against the sky. Just for a second before the fog closed again. But a second was enough. Did you see that? Rowe whispered, checking his camera frantically to see if he'd captured it. Walsh was pale. That was no known species of bird. The wingspan had to be 30 feet at least, Tim finished, just like the stories say. The fog swirled around us, and in its movement I swore I could see shapes forming and dissolving, wings, claws, eyes. My headache returned, worse than before. "We're being watched," I said. "Evaluated." "By what?" Walsh asked, his scientist's skepticism fighting with what he'd just seen. "By the Stormkeeper," Tim answered. "The guardian of the boundary." Rowe was still looking at his camera, flipping through images. "I got something," he said suddenly. "It's blurry, but..." Before he could show us, a crack of lightning split the air, striking just feet from where we stood. The thunder was immediate, so loud it knocked us all to the ground. When I looked up, Rowe was running, heading straight for the ridge path. "Rowe!" I shouted. "Stop!" But he kept going, camera in hand, straight toward the boundary we'd been warned not to cross, straight toward the nest of the Stormkeeper. "Rowe!" I shouted again, but he was already disappearing into the fog, heading up the path toward the ridge. I turned to Walsh and Tim. "We can't let him go up there alone." Walsh nodded, quickly stuffing equipment into his backpack. Tim looked troubled, but grabbed his pack too. "We're crossing the boundary," he said quietly. "The Stormkeeper won't like that." The path up the ridge was steep and slippery with morning dew. The fog grew thicker as we climbed, swirling around us in ways that didn't seem natural. Sometimes I thought I saw shapes in it. Giant wings, a curved beak, watching eyes. "Rowe!" I called every few minutes, but there was no answer. About halfway up, Walsh stopped suddenly. "Look," he said, pointing to the ground. There in the dirt was a feather, but not like any feather I'd ever seen. It was huge, over 3 feet long, and black with a metallic blue sheen. When Walsh reached for it, static electricity crackled between his fingers and the feather. "Don't touch it," Tim warned, but Walsh picked it up anyway. "It's warm," he said, surprised, "and heavy, like it's made of metal." I reached out to feel it, and the moment my fingers touched the feather, something happened. A jolt ran up my arm, and suddenly I wasn't on the ridge anymore. I was seeing a different forest, older, wilder. The mountains looked slightly different, and strange animals moved through ancient trees. Above, a massive bird circled, its wings creating wind that bent the treetops. People were gathered in a clearing, looking up at the bird with their arms raised. They wore clothing I didn't recognize, but somehow I knew they were ancestors of Tim's people. They were singing to the bird, no, communicating with it, making an agreement. Then I was back on the ridge, gasping. Walsh and Tim were staring at me. "What happened?" Walsh asked. "You went completely still for about 10 seconds. My hand was still on the feather. I pulled it away quickly. I struggled to find words. I saw the past, the Stormkeeper, and the first people who made agreements with it." Tim didn't look surprised. "The stories say the Thunderbird can show visions to those it chooses." Walsh looked skeptical, but before he could say anything, we heard a shout from higher up the ridge. "Guys, you have to see this." It was Rowe. He sounded excited, not scared. We hurried up the path and found him standing at the edge of a large, flat area. The fog had cleared here, and what we saw made us all stop in our tracks. It was a nest, but like no nest I'd ever seen. It was enormous, at least 40 feet across, made of twisted trees, massive boulders, and what looked like metal pieces, old mining equipment, parts of a small plane, even a crushed truck. The whole thing hummed with electrical energy. Small. Sparks jumped between metal pieces. "This is incredible," Rowe said, taking photos. "Proof of an unknown species." But Tim was looking at something else, a pattern of stones around the nest, clearly placed deliberately in a circle. "This is a sacred site," he said. "Not just a nest, a temple." Walsh was using a small device to take readings. "The electromagnetic field here is so strong it's affecting my instruments. And there's radiation, but not a kind I recognize." I felt strange standing there, like I was in 2 places at once. The headache was gone, replaced by a buzzing feeling, as if my whole body was filled with static electricity. My scars tingled. "We shouldn't be here," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew I was meant to be here, that I'd been drawn here. Rowe was moving closer to the nest, his camera clicking rapidly. There's something in the center, he called back. Something shiny. Ro, don't, I started, but he was already climbing over the outer rim of the nest. The change was immediate. The air pressure dropped suddenly, making my ears pop. The buzzing energy around us intensified, and above, the clear sky darkened as clouds formed out of nowhere, swirling directly over the nest. "Get out of there!" Tim shouted to Ro. "Now!" Ro looked up at the rapidly forming storm, his face showing fear for the first time. He scrambled back toward the edge of the nest. Too late. Lightning struck the center of the nest, then again and again, not from the clouds, but from the ground up like reverse lightning. The strikes formed a cage around Ro, who stood frozen in terror. "We have to help him!" Walsh shouted, moving forward. I grabbed his arm. "Wait!" Something was forming in the air above the nest, a shape made of crackling electricity and swirling air. It took form slowly, massive wings, a body bigger than a bear, a head with a sharp beak. The Thunderbird, half physical, half energy, its eyes opened, glowing blue, then shifting to amber. It looked directly at Ro. Ro raised his camera, his hands shaking. "No!" Tim yelled. "Don't!" The flash went off. In that instant, the Thunderbird's eyes turned deep red. It opened its beak, and the sound that came out wasn't a cry. It was thunder itself, so powerful I felt it in my chest. The air around Ro crackled with energy. Then everything happened. At once, lightning struck Ro directly. His body jerked, lit from within for a terrible moment. His camera exploded in his hands, and the Thunderbird vanished, not flying away, but disappearing between one lightning flash and the next, as if it had turned into the electricity itself. Ro crumpled to the ground. We ran to him, but I knew before we reached him. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. His skin had strange, burn patterns, feather shapes seared into his flesh, just like the campers. "We need to get out of here," Walsh said, his voice shaking. "Now." But I couldn't move. Something was happening to me. The static feeling was growing stronger, concentrating in my scars. They burned, but not painfully, more like they were waking. Tim noticed. "Victoria, what's wrong?" "My scars," I managed to say. "They're reacting to this place." Above us, the storm grew stronger. The clouds spun faster, lightning jumping from cloud to cloud. Walsh grabbed Ro's camera from where it had fallen, somehow not completely destroyed. He checked the screen. "There's an image," he said in disbelief. "The last photo he took." He turned the camera to show us. The image was partly melted, the edges blackened, but in the center was a clear shot of the Thunderbird. Massive wings spread, body crackling with energy, eyes glowing red. It was looking directly at the camera, at us, at me, as if triggered by our seeing the image. The storm above exploded with new fury. Lightning struck all around us, but strangely, none hit us directly. "It's herding us," Tim shouted over the thunder. "Driving us back." He was right. The lightning was striking in a pattern, forcing us away from the nest, back toward the path down. We ran, carrying Ro's body between us. The lightning followed, striking closer when we slowed, backing off when we moved faster. By the time we reached our camp, we were exhausted and soaked from the sudden rain. The storm stayed above the ridge, lightning still flashing continuously. We laid Ro's body in my tent. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Walsh broke the silence. "We have proof now," he said, holding up Ro's camera. "Proof that it exists." "And what good did that do Ro?" I asked bitterly. Tim was looking at me strangely. "Your scars," he said. "They're different." I touched my neck and felt it immediately. The raised skin of my burn scars had changed texture. When I looked in the small mirror from my pack, I gasped. The scars had shifted into a pattern, no longer random burn marks, but distinct shapes that looked eerily like feathers. "It's chosen you," Tim said quietly. "The Stormkeeper has marked you." "For what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Before he could answer, Walsh's laptop suddenly turned on by itself. The screen showed the same pattern we'd seen before, the magnetic field forming the shape of a bird. But now there was more, lines connecting different points on the map. "It's showing us something," Walsh said, studying the screen. "These connections, they're forming a boundary line." Tim looked over his shoulder. "The sacred lands," he said. "It's showing us the exact boundary of what it's protecting." I looked at the screen and felt a strange sense of understanding. "It's not just randomly attacking," I said. "It's defending something specific." "The old burial grounds," Tim nodded. "And now the logging roads are cutting into that territory." Walsh was typing frantically. "If we can map this exactly, maybe we can prevent more deaths, keep people away from the boundary." Outside, the storm still raged over the ridge. But now I could almost hear patterns in the thunder, like words just beyond understanding. I touched my new feather-shaped scars. They were warm under my fingers, tingling with the same energy I'd felt near the nest. Something had changed between me and the Stormkeeper. Some connection had formed, and somehow I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. We made it back to the ranger station the next morning with Rose's body. The official cause of death was recorded as a lightning strike, which was true, just not the whole truth. While Tim handled the paperwork, Walsh and I studied the data we'd collected. The laptop had continued running all night, recording the strange patterns in the electromagnetic field. "Look at this," Walsh said, pointing to the screen. "The boundary line perfectly matches old survey maps of tribal lands from the 1800s. He pulled up another map. "And here's where the new logging road cuts through, exactly where the campers were found." "And where Roe died," I added quietly. We were interrupted when the door opened. A small, elderly man with weathered skin and bright eyes walked in, leaning on a carved wooden cane. "Samuel Weathers," Tim said, introducing him. "He asked to speak with us, specifically with you, Victoria." Samuel studied me for a long moment, his eyes lingering on my neck where the feather-shaped scars were visible above my collar. "You've been marked," he said simply, "just like I was." He pulled down the collar of his shirt to reveal old, faded scars on his chest, in the unmistakable pattern of feathers. "What happened to you?" I asked. Samuel sat down heavily in a chair. "I was 10 years old. 63 years ago, logging companies were moving into the area, cutting roads where they shouldn't. I was playing up on the ridge, a place the elders had warned us never to go." He touched his scars. "I saw it, the Thunderbird. It struck me with lightning, but I didn't die. Instead, I saw things, the past, the purpose of the Stormkeeper." "What is its purpose?" Walsh asked, skepticism clear in his voice. "To protect the sacred places," Samuel said. "The burial grounds go back thousands of years, but also to protect something else, something older." "What?" I prompted when he paused. "A doorway," Samuel said. "A place where the boundary between worlds is thin, where spirits can pass through. The ancient ones knew about it. They made agreements with the Guardian to watch over it, to keep people away." Walsh looked like he wanted to argue, but I raised a hand to stop him. "The feather we found. When I touched it, I saw the past." Samuel nodded. "The Stormkeeper can show visions to those it chooses. It showed me the same thing all those years. Ergo, the first agreement." "But why now?" Tim asked. "Why is it so active after being quiet for so long?" Samuel's face darkened. "Every 40 years or so, people forget. They push the boundaries. This time it's worse. The logging road cuts straight through the most sacred part of the grounds. And there's talk of mining operations." Walsh was still, typing. "These readings," he muttered, "they're off the charts. If this entity can control electrical fields this powerful, it could be used." "It's not a resource to be used," Samuel cut him off sharply. "It's a guardian, a keeper of balance." I looked at the maps on the screen. "The boundary is what matters. I said slowly, understanding forming. The Stormkeeper doesn't care about us specifically. It cares about protecting what's beyond the boundary. Yes, Samuel said, but now you've been marked. That means something. Before I could ask what, Walsh's phone rang. His face went pale as he listened. When? He asked. How many? Another pause. We'll be right there. He hung up and looked at us. There's been another incident, a survey team for the logging company. 5 men, all dead from lightning strikes. Where? Tim asked. Right where the new road crosses the boundary line. Scars began to tingle. Outside, though the sky was clear, I heard distant thunder. We drove to the site in silence. What we found was horrible. 5 bodies, all with the now familiar feather burn patterns. Their equipment was melted, trucks overturned, while Tim and Walsh examined the scene. Samuel pulled me aside. You need to communicate with it, he said urgently, before more people die. Communicate? How? Through the connection you now share. He touched his own scars. These aren't just marks, they're a link. I don't know how to use it, I said. Tonight, go to the stone circle near the ridge. Not the nest, that's too dangerous. The circle is a place for communication. Take copper, the Stormkeeper is drawn to it, and take your blood. My blood? I repeated, alarmed. Just a few drops, mixed with the copper. It strengthens the connection. Seeing my expression, he added, I did. This, years ago, it's how I negotiated the last boundary agreement. But I'm too old now. The Keeper has chosen you. I wanted to refuse, to say this was all crazy, but the bodies on the ground, the feather-shaped burns, my own changing scars, all of it was real. I'll try, I said finally. That evening I told Walsh and Tim what Samuel had suggested. That's insane, Walsh said immediately. You can't go up there alone. I have to, I insisted. More people will die if I don't. Tim was quiet for a moment. I know the stone circle he means. My grandfather took me there once. It's an ancient meeting place. This is madness, Walsh muttered, but I could see he was thinking about the 5 new bodies we'd found. I'm going, I said firmly. Tonight? As darkness fell, I prepared. I took a small copper rod from Walsh's equipment. Using my knife, I pricked my finger and let a few drops of blood fall onto the copper. It seemed to absorb the blood, taking on a darker hue. My backpack held only essentials: water, first aid kit, flashlight, and the scorched carabiner from my partner's gear. For some reason, I felt I needed it. Tim gave me a small pouch of herbs. Burn this in the circle, he said. It's part of the old way of showing respect. Walsh just shook his head, but handed me a small recording device. At least document what happens. As I headed out into the gathering darkness, the sky was clear and full of stars, but over the ridge, clouds were forming, and occasional flashes of light pulsed within them. The Stormkeeper was waiting. The hike to the stone circle took nearly an hour. I walked slowly, my flashlight beam bouncing across the rocky path. Above me, clouds gathered and swirled, but only over the ridge. The rest of the sky remained clear and starlit. My scars tingled more with each step closer to the ridge. It wasn't painful, more like the feeling when a foot falls asleep and then wakes up. By the time I reached the circle of standing stones, my whole neck felt alive with electricity. The stone circle was smaller than I expected. 7 rough stones about waist high, arranged in a perfect circle about 20 feet across. In the center was a flat stone that looked like an altar. I stepped between 2 of the stones into the circle. Immediately, the air felt different, heavier, charged. The static electricity made my hair stand on end. Following Tim's instructions, I placed the herbs on the center stone and lit them with a match. They burned slowly, giving off a sweet, earthy smell. Then I took out the copper rod stained with my blood and set it beside the burning herbs. Nothing happened for several long minutes. I stood there, feeling foolish and scared at the same time. Maybe Samuel was wrong. Maybe this was all just a flash of lightning lit up the entire ridge, though there was no thunder. The clouds above began to swirl faster, forming a spiral directly over the stone circle. The air pressure dropped suddenly, making my ears pop. Something was coming. I fought the urge to run. My heart hammered in my chest, and my old fear of lightning threatened to paralyze me, but I stood my ground. The feather-shaped scars on my neck began to glow with a faint blue light. I could see it reflected in the polished surface of the center stone. Another lightning flash, closer this time, followed, immediately by a crack of thunder so loud it shook the ground. The spiral of clouds tightened, forming a funnel that reached down toward the circle, and then I saw it. The Thunderbird emerged from the clouds, partly solid, partly made of crackling energy. Its wingspan was enormous, at least 30 feet across. Its body was covered in feathers that seemed to shift between black and a deep metallic blue. Its eyes glowed, blue now, not the angry red I'd seen before. It circled the stone ring once, twice, the air from its wings hitting me like a strong wind. Then it landed on one of the standing stones, which somehow supported its massive weight. Its eyes fixed on me, not hostile but intensely curious. I should have been terrified. Part of me was, but another part, the part connected to the scars on my neck, felt something else, recognition, understanding. "I know why you're killing people," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. They crossed the boundary. The Thunderbird's head tilted slightly. The air around us filled with crackling energy, and in my mind I heard something. Not words exactly, but impressions, images, feelings, sacred ground, ancient pact, violation. "The logging road," I said. "The survey team. They didn't know." More impressions flooded my mind, stronger now, many warnings, many signs, ignored, boundary broken repeatedly. "They can't understand your warnings," I explained, "not like they could in the past. The connections have been lost." The Thunderbird's eyes shifted color slightly, from blue to a deeper indigo. "You understand. You are marked. You can speak for them." I realized what was happening. It was communicating with me through some kind of mental connection, using the link created by the scars. "Yes," I said, "I can speak for them. Tell them where the boundary is. Keep them away from the sacred places." I took out the map Walsh had printed for me, showing the boundary line as we understood it from the electromagnetic readings. "Is this right?" I asked. "Is this the boundary that needs to be protected?" The Thunderbird leaned forward, its massive head coming closer to me. I forced myself not to step back. Its eyes studied the map, then met mine again. More impressions came, along with mental images of the landscape, showing me where the boundary really lay. Some places matched our map, others didn't. I took out a pen with shaking hands and marked, "The corrections." "I understand now," I said. "We'll keep people away from these areas. No more roads, no mining, I promise." The Thunderbird's eyes narrowed slightly. Promises broken before. Many times. "This time will be different," I insisted. "I'll make them understand." The massive bird's head moved from side to side, a gesture that seemed unsettlingly human. Needs binding, needs sacrifice. My heart skipped a beat. Sacrifice. Old way, blood and metal, life force binding the words. I looked at the copper rod on the center stone, stained with my blood. It wasn't enough. "What do you need?" I asked, trying to keep the fear from my voice. The Thunderbird's eyes shifted to the carabiner hanging from my belt, the scorched one from my partner's gear, metal charged with loss, with regret, strong binding. I unhooked the carabiner with trembling fingers. I'd carried it for 2 years, a reminder of my failure to save my partner. The thought of giving it up made my chest tighten. But that was the point, wasn't it? A sacrifice had to matter. I placed the carabiner on the stone next to the copper rod. "This is all I have," I said. The Thunderbird watched me closely, its eyes shifting to a deep purple. not enough. Need your mark, voluntary surrender. I didn't understand at first. Then it hit me. It wanted me to give up something more personal, more permanent. The scars, I whispered. You want me to offer my scars, willing connection, bridge between worlds. I touched the feather patterns on my neck. But I don't know how to give them to you. The thunderbird spread its wings wide. Lightning crackled between the feathers. Stand in the center. Accept the fire. I understood then. It wanted to strike me. With lightning, just as it had struck Samuel years ago. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Lightning had killed my partner. Had killed Roe. Had killed those campers and the survey team. But something deeper told me this was different. This was communion, not destruction. With slow steps, I moved to the center of the circle and stood on the flat stone. I placed one hand on the copper rod, the other on my partner's carabiner. I accept, I said. The thunderbird's eyes blazed bright blue. It spread its wings to their full span, and power crackled around its entire body. The air filled with the smell of ozone. It opened its beak, and the cry that came out was like thunder given voice. Lightning gathered at the tips of its wings, building in intensity. I closed my eyes. The bolt hit me directly. But it wasn't pain. I felt it was connection. Pure energy flowed through me, lighting up every nerve, every cell. In that moment, I understood everything. I saw the ancient people who first made contact with the Stormkeeper. I saw the sacred places it protected, not just burial grounds, but places where the boundary between worlds was thin. Places of power. Saw its purpose, not malevolence but balance, protection. And I saw myself somehow part of that ancient pact now. The lightning faded, but the connection remained. When I opened my eyes, the thunderbird was still there, watching me. But something had changed. I could feel it more clearly now, sense its thoughts more distinctly. I looked down at my hands, my arms. New scars had formed, intricate patterns of branching lines, like lightning frozen on my skin. They glowed with a faint blue light. Bound. Now keeper of the boundary, speaker for the storm, the thunderbird raised its wings and launched into the air. It circled once more, then rose into the cloud funnel, which began to dissipate as it ascended. Before it vanished completely, one final impression touched my mind. We watched together now. Then it was gone. The clouds dispersed, revealing stars. The charged feeling in the air faded to normal. But I was forever changed. I could feel it in every cell of my body, a connection to something ancient and powerful. I picked up my partner's carabiner and the copper rod. Both had changed, melted and fused together into a strange new shape that resembled a feather. With shaking legs, I made my way back down the path toward the camp. The new scars on my arms glowed faintly in the darkness, lighting my way. I didn't need the flashlight anymore.